Greetings and salutations, and welcome to the ASTROLABE, brought to you by King Pilled. I am your host and humble narrator, the King Pilled One. Good to see you guys in the chat. Eric Winters says, needs some morale boosting. Well, I don't know. There's going to be some kind of dark stuff in this one, but going to try to get you some good stuff as well. Hopefully we get a little morale boosting in here. There are many dark things happening right now, but there are good things as well. And in every single, let's see, how poetic can we make this? In every single rain cloud, there is a ray of sunshine. I don't know, something like that. Either way, do me a favor, hit the like button as you wander your way on in here. I would recommend you go listen to the stream that Mr. Jason Miranchuk did last night, but the Boomer Tech Gremlins attacked him, and he had to pull the stream down. But he said he's going to be doing another one covering some of the same ground, and in particular, his talk on the state of the insurance industry and reinsurance in light of this California fire is that it is absolutely must listen material. You have to hear him go into detail on this because there's not enough people who are paying attention to this right now, and I suspect that the media is probably the level of financial interests that are going to be threatened by this are such that the media, I suspect, is going to be bought off, and the legacy press is going to do their best to not cover it for as long as possible. So I'm going to take it upon our shoulders to push this message as much as possible that the collapse of the insurance market is going to be catastrophic. So I don't know of anything that you could directly do to take advantage of that, apart from just be aware of it. That this is very likely to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak. However, we'll get to that here in just a little bit. I got some stuff on Newscum's folly, as I'm terming it. Newscum's folly. The way he created this situation, the way he's handling it, is just a catastrophe. I've got an article that I'll read you guys, posted in The Spectator, commentating on the state of California politics from a very well followed, I don't know, so like Silicon Valley tech journalist sort of figure. I got an update on the Gaza peace deal situation, and let's see, what else do we got here? Interesting information. The Indiana House Republican Caucus is talking about absorbing part of Illinois as we're moving into an age of changing borders. There's some borders that we haven't paid a lot of attention to that may change. We're also going to talk about the Zoomers sacrifice. This is a continuation of the Bootstraps discourse from yesterday. I've got some interesting commentary on that, some sobering commentary, and a great Substack piece written by Powerful Mutual Trey 50 Daniel, talking about why you should become a good sacrifice. And then let's see, what else we got here? We got some Mark Andreessen went on the Hoover Institute talking to Peter Robinson yesterday, or the episode was posted yesterday. One of the single best podcasts I've heard in a while right now. Just absolutely packed with information. So I've got some clips to play from that. One of them is kind of a long one, talking about which one is it? This one here, yeah. Exactly how the DOGE is going to work, what their thinking is, what their legal basis is going to be moving forward. So there are some very good nuggets in this one. It's a 13-minute clip, but we're going to do our best to sit through it, and hopefully it doesn't get the stream suspended on YouTube. If it does, if anything ever happens, just so you know going forward, many of you guys already know this, but if we're watching something, I'm streaming, most likely what would happen is I'm streaming a video that's posted on YouTube, and suddenly YouTube suspends the stream when their algorithm picks up on the fact that I'm streaming YouTube content and they get mad about it. It suspends the stream on YouTube. It doesn't end it, it just suspends it, and it'll still be going over on X, and as soon as I finish streaming the no content, then the stream will pick back up again on YouTube. So that just a warning. There's the possibility that happens today because I've got some longer clips to play, and I think the interview is probably posted on YouTube. So then Larry Fink is saying interesting things about xenophobic immigration policies, not at all what you might expect. And then we are going to round it off with a long read. This is going to be a long one. So I'm going to try to get through some of this earlier stuff as quickly as possible to leave time for this this Substack article written by Moldbug, by Yarvin, back in December 28th, commentating on thoughts spawned by the great H-1B discourse. It is it flew past my wasn't on my radar when it happened, and I was looking through some of his posts today and started reading this one, and it's very, very good, sobering, very, very theory cell like, but I think it is important, regardless of what you may personally think about Yarvin. I think it's very good to keep an eye on what he's saying, because we know that the incoming vice president is a Yarvin appreciator. Andreessen himself, in that interview that I'm going to play some clips from for you, he referred to my friend Curtis Yarvin. So when Yarvin is talking, important people are listening. So I think that it's incumbent upon us to also pay attention to what he's saying, because it may, it kind of signals important things to follow. BTC hit 100K today. Okay. So it's been lagging lately, but it's picking back up again. I think my guess is, from listening to the people who are smarter than me, I think that there's a good chance that it just kind of hovers right around in the range where it has been for a couple of months, and then it's going to take off again. But there's a bunch of things that could cause it to start mooning again. I think because of this California insurance crisis. This is not this California fire. Don't anybody who's telling you, oh, they planned this, they did this on purpose, this is their scheme, is retarded. Nobody planned something like this. They may have let a fire happen, but in no world did they anticipate that it was going to be a fire that could have mid to high 9-figure damages, maybe more. That's what we're probably going to be looking at. Nobody in the world ever possibly imagined. Not 9-figure. Sorry, I need to move my move the comma there. This would be 12-figure, mid to high 12-figure damages. I think that's probably what we're ultimately going to be looking at. And nobody ever planned for something like this. This is the perfect intersection of catastrophic incompetence mixed with some malevolence, and it is going to be a drag for a while. And I'll just say here, before we get into that conversation later on, before I get started with the slop, I'm just going to say, I fully expect the insurance market to get bailed out. I don't think there's any way around it. And everyone's going to be mad. Everyone's going to hate it. But I think the federal government is going to have to bail out the insurance market in one way or another. And it's because the alternative is simply unconscionable. Nobody wants to live, no matter how big of a game someone talks, nobody wants to live in that alternate reality. So anyways, do me a favor, share the show, hit the like button. You can leave a comment in the live chat. Any sort of engagement helps with the numbers, tells the algorithm that you like what you hear. So even if you hate it, even if you start rage posting, please do rage post in the live chat. That helps the numbers. You can send a super chat if you'd like. Don't have a goal today because we're working on fulfilling what I promised with the last goal, getting this stream with Jason and I talking about the Ukraine war, which takes on some additional color now with this Gaza-Israel peace deal. There's an article written by Robert Kagan in The Atlantic, and we are going to have an AI read that for us while we're playing Halo. That'll be a stream that we do. I'm hoping we can do it here in the next couple of days. May not be possible. We may have to push it to next week, but we are going to deliver on that. All right, so yeah, share the show on X, on YouTube, wherever you'd like. And I also saw, it looks like Substack is introducing live streaming. So I may end up adding that on here. I may start live streaming to Substack as well. It's just a matter of time before I just get away from YouTube altogether. But right now, it's the place to be. It's got the best infrastructure, primarily for monetization. That's the biggest thing. Even though every single video that I post on here, every single one gets demonetized immediately. This very first clip that I show you guys, I know it's going to get copyright claimed, demonetized instantly. So I make basically no money whatsoever off of the actual ad views or anything like that. But the only real revenue I get from YouTube is from super chats and from memberships. You can become a channel member, $5 a month. That's basically the only revenue that I get, and it's still the best monetizable platform as of right now. I'm just really hoping that XTV gets its act together here shortly. I can't even go. I tried to go look back and see what the my numbers, like the stream numbers, because I was trying to see, okay, what's the total audience across all the platforms, and I tried to go back and see what are the stream numbers on X, and literally the only thing that I can do right now is scroll through the timeline, find the tweet that has the stream in it, and look at and see what the numbers are on it, the impressions on it. Like, that's the only thing that I can do. There's no area in the back, analytics or anything. Even with the producer feature that it has, you can like schedule a stream and you can manage the stream once it's going. But I can't go like look at my analytics. It'll just give me my total video analytics, which includes any meme video that I tweeted, any interview video, or anything like that. It just lumps it all together. So I'm desperately pleading with you, Elon. Please, I will move all of my operations to X if you would just give me an acceptable streaming platform where I can manage my analytics, I can manage the details of the stream, I can engage with the audience well. There's a nice little back office where I can manage the live and then monetizing it. Like, these are the big things. Elon, I'm begging you, please free us from the clutches of YouTube. A shout out to Lorenza Duran, commenting from X. She says, "Hola, this is Saw from Tegucigalpa. You guys may have seen her on the stream yesterday. Saw 700. She's commenting on YouTube. We're now seeing her from Twitter. She says, "Did you say you visited Central America yesteryear?" Yes, I've been to Central America several times. I don't know if you consider Mexico Central America, but I went down there for a couple of church mission trips when I was in, let's see. Yeah, both of them were when I was in high school. And then before high school, I went to El Salvador, and I spent 3 weeks in El Salvador. That was also a church mission trip. We stayed at an orphanage and did like an evangelistic series and helped out with the kids and that sort of thing. And then while I was in high school, the academy that I attended had an orchestra and choir, and I played the cello and sang in the men's octet and in the choir. And we did a music tour in Guatemala. And so we were in Guatemala for about 3 weeks again, and dipped down into Honduras for a day and went and saw some ruins and some jungle stuff. And I loved it. I love Central America a lot. I would be very happy for, at least in certain senses, I'd be very happy for Central America to just be absorbed formally into the greater American empire. Okay. So yesterday, CG Constantine, who I see here in the chat, he mentioned this lighters video, and he sent it to me. And I'm going to share it with you guys now because this is freaking cool. These old lighters. And the soundtrack here is going to definitely get it demonetized, but yeah, the sacrifices I make for you guys. I will minimize my my monetizing capacity just for the sheer experience of listening to the combination of this or consuming the combination of the audio track here with these really cool freaking lighters.
I'm sorry, but old lighters are just more than lighters.
I don't want to set the world on fire. I just want to start a flame in your heart. In my heart I have but one need.
What did I see there?
In my...
Is that a German flag? I can't see well enough from here to tell. Are those German flags here? The Sarasatro, 1938. My screen is like, I don't know, 4 feet away from me, and it's really small, so I can't actually tell. Can you guys see better on your screen? Is that a German flag?
Heart I have but one desire, and that one is you. No other will do. I've lost all ambition for worldly acclaim. I just want to be the one you love.
Huh. That's the one I want right there. That one is cool. Play that one more time. Come on, back up. The big nose lighter. This one. Yeah. Oh, man. I need to get myself a good lighter. Enough of this Bic nonsense. Okay, a little more slop here. This was, a few weeks ago I finished watching the TV series Dark, which is, I cannot recommend enough. Immediately top 2-3 best series that I've ever watched. I didn't talk about it on here at all because there's such great potential for one simple sentence to be a massive spoiler, and I didn't want that. I hate spoilers. I hate having stuff spoiled for me, so I never mentioned it. But just finished watching that, and then I had 3 Body Problem recommended to me, and so I've been working my way through that slowly. And the contrast between the two is in terms of production quality and dialogue and the writing and everything is so incredibly stark. It's shocking to me genuinely that 3 Body Problem, the storyline is very interesting. And so I'm struggling through it because I find the storyline interesting and I want to see where they're going with it. And I like to keep an eye on these sorts of narratives to see what exactly what they're telling us. What are they thinking about? What are they telling us? What sort of signals are we getting? And yes, Dark is the German show. It's best consumed, in my opinion, using the original German track, but with the English subtitles. I tried to watch it for a little bit with just the English dubs, and it was incredibly jarring. I don't know how people do that. I loved listening to it in the original German. It is so incredibly good. Yeah, Cooper's one of the people who was pushing me to do it. I've had my whole family's been telling me you got to watch this show. I finally got around to it, and it is so good. It's I mean, probably the closest thing out there. It's kind of a lazy comparison, but probably the closest thing out there is Lost. But the big difference is that Dark actually resolved it extremely satisfactorily. Again, maybe a little bit of a spoiler there, but I don't think it's too much. And I'm someone who enjoyed Lost. I found the ending satisfactory. It was fine. I know a lot of people will get really worked up about that, and they disagree. I'm fine. But Dark is just absolute chef's kiss. So fascinating. It's a work to follow. Like, there's some people, I think, I know some of you guys out there, you probably won't even follow it. I've had conversations with people. I'm like, yeah, that person would not be able to follow it. It's heady. It's dense. There's a lot of different threads. You have to remember a lot of things and keep track of it. And anyways, 3 Body Problem, on the other hand, is like the storyline again is fascinating. It's very interesting. It's kind of it's got a Black Mirror sort of vibe to it, but it is so over the top with the girl boss stuff and just the dialogue. It's extremely millennial. I was talking to Cooper about this the other day. It's extremely millennial. Everyone, the dialogue is all super unrealistic, and they've got all these zingers, and people, their attitudes suddenly change in the middle of a conversation where they go from being like sort of just calm and whatever, and then all of a sudden they got to get really performative about their little section of dialogue. It's just so bad. It's unbelievable. It's the Game of Thrones creators who created it. There's a tremendous amount of money put behind this, and it's so bad. But the story itself is actually pretty interesting. I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who wants to watch it, but I mean, I'd recommend watching it for that purpose. And I haven't finished the season yet. But anyway, so I've been thinking a lot about things related to time travel, because those are implicated in both of these shows. And so this was extra funny to me. It was a long way of leading up for this brief stand-up comedy bit.
Thought about like time travel. Like if I went back in time, knowing everything I know now, I don't think I would make a difference. I don't think you would even hear about it. If I went back to the 20s and I like saw some guy on like an old phone, I'd be like, hey, eventually they have phones you just carry in your pocket. And he'd be like, yeah, how do they do it? It's like, you know, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how they're doing it. It's like a satellite or something. And they'd be like, what's a satellite? Well, I shouldn't have even brought that up then. It's like a round metal dish or something that's got to go pretty high in the air. I honestly don't think I could prove I'm from the future. I mean, they would want some proof, you know? Who's the next president? Oh, boy.
Oh, man, as all good comedy does, he's shining the light directly on this very prototypical problem of our era. We've got this fantastic technology. We see ourselves as this advanced society, and yet how primitive are we on an individual basis? The vast majority, I mean, even don't watch those videos where the TikTok slop videos where they go interview somebody on the street and they ask them basic questions about history or world geography or anything. There is nothing more black pilling than that. I suppose you could look at his white pilling as like, hey, here's what the competition is. But humans are social creatures. So our own individual quality is not entirely contingent, but it's largely contingent on the net of everyone around us. We've got all this amazing, fantastic technology that makes our lives so easy, and nobody knows how it works. Nobody. If we had a great asteroid hit the Earth and launch us all back into the Stone Age, it would probably take a couple thousand years to rebuild all of this technology again, just because it's all been so the technology curve is outstripping the human capital curve. And I'm not by human capital, I don't mean in like the corporate human resources sense. I mean in the like your individual human capital, your knowledge, your awareness of the world, your ability to contribute, your productivity, all these sorts of things are completely outstripped. And that's going to have to reset. There's going to have to be some sort of a rebalancing that happens because of that. So there's two ways that rebalancing can happen. It can happen because of it can happen on the technology side where the technology collapses, or the capacity to generate and manage it, that collapses to the level of humanity, or humanity has to bring up their own quality. And in the end, it's not going to be one or the other. It's going to be both to a certain extent. Anyways, we'll get more into that conversation here in a little bit. As soon as I saw the words on this, I was like, oh, this is Astrolabe content. What are schizoedits?
Schizoedits are a legitimate form of outsider art. They have a feverish quality and a manic exuberance. Self-taught artists produce these masterpieces in total isolation from the art world. Schizoedits are blood memories of greatness that bombard the brain. Esoteric motifs and symbols burst forth unrelentingly, unironically. Odinism, esoteric Nazism, acid fascism, hyperborea, neo-paganism, aliens, time travel, the legend of Atlantis. This is like snorting Thulean crack at 120 frames per second. Schizoedits look as if they're made by psychiatric patients. It's like watching a psychosis unfold in real time. They say if you stare long enough at a spinning sonorad, it will activate your ancestral DNA. Schizoedits are a cathartic experience that resonate with the viewer on a primal level. It's an MK Ultra attack designed to awaken the spirit. Schizoeditors are like Dogma 95 auteurs. Their work has that disquieting feeling of strangeness that is common with avant-garde filmmaking. Outsider artists care little for visibility. Most of them work in obscurity. Will these masterpieces remain unknown on the fringes of the internet, or will they break through into the mainstream consciousness?
In answer to the question, by their very nature, they cannot break into the mainstream consciousness. because the act of breaking into the mainstream consciousness would kind of remove the essence of it. It being outsider art itself is what defines the art form. For it to break into the mainstream consciousness, all the people who like schizo edits would hate schizo edits that broke into the mainstream consciousness. This one, ironically, actually is verging in that direction, because it's done in this kind of like ironic way. You've got the jokes in the monologue there, and it's an AI person. You have the woman, kind of stately sounding woman describing it. So there's like some irony in there. But the original schizo edits are a distinctly Zoomer art form. This is a millennial explaining the Zoomer art form and trying to sort of have the Zoomer art thing, but we got to explain it. We got to try to explain it in the Zoomer way, but we're still going to try to explain it because we're millennials and we have to explain everything. Andrew says, talking about the third body problem, he says, even the Netflix series wasn't that woke, really tough to wokeify the Chinese worldview. The girl boss stuff was about the limit of it. And they're definitely, they could have gone even more over the top with it. It stands out so starkly because of the subject matter. The seriousness and the heaviness and the gravity, pardon the pun, of the subject matter makes the girl boss stuff. Like there's this one scene, I don't want to give away too much here, but you've got this Asian chick from New Zealand who is this like top physicist or something like that. And she's probably got to be 30, something like that. And they're trying to solve this massive physics problem. And so she comes in to give her presentation to like all the top physicists in the world. They've all brought these top physicists, the top of their field, Nobel Prizes and all this sort of thing. But she's the only one who can figure any of this stuff out. She's the one who's going to come up with the brilliant solution. And they have this whole scene where she goes and she writes it on the whiteboard. And she's like, she's describing stuff to them in terms that like you can tell it's written for her to describe this to the audience, not to describe it to the other physicists. And it's just it's so unserious. It's the dialogue and the acting and stuff is on tier with like what was the what's the show I'm thinking of here with everything just went out of my mind. It's a Miami-based detective show with the dude who puts his glasses on. He has like the one-liners where he puts his glasses on and delivers the punchline. It just completely escaped my mind what it's called. It's like 2000s detective show tier dialogue and acting. You've got a black dude who's this super brilliant I don't know, like quantum mechanics guy or something like that. And he's like a total stoner pothead that you never see him doing any work, but he's pining after this other chick. And it's all the social stuff in it is just so discordant with the rest of the material that it's brutal. No, it wasn't Miami Vice. It was something else. I can't remember. Anyways, let's keep it going. So someone had a bunch of people send me this one. So I was like, okay, the people have spoken. They want this one on the Labe. This is a CSI Miami. Yes, that's what it was. CSI. CSI was the one I was looking for. It's CSI Miami level like acting and dialogue. It's like that sort of really hokey mainstream 2000s TV show, but with this like serious production and dealing with very heavy, weighty matters of science and aliens and all this sort of thing. David Caruso, yeah. So this is obviously an AI video. A couple levels to this. Just the content of the video is funny, but also note that if you were watching this without the audio on it, it wouldn't look AI to you. It looks very real.
Mr. Hegseth, are you attracted to obese Hawaiian women with a below normal IQ?
No, Senator.
Mr. Hegseth, are you aware that I used the potty all by myself today?
No, Senator.
Mr. Hegseth, you seem to be pretty fertile. If confirmed, would you commit to putting a baby in me?
No, Senator.
Mr. Hegseth, are you saying under oath that you refuse to impregnate a portly Hawaiian retarded woman, even if she can use the potty all by herself? Mr. Hegseth.
This is what these people deserve. This is the best way to handle these people. Just make these sorts of, like, imagine Mazie Hirono wielding any sort of power. You could not have a greater condemnation of your society than that. All right. So report, former major DNC fundraiser and influencer Lindy Lee has converted to MAGA, per the Daily Mail. Do you trust her? Well, I don't really care. You don't have to trust her. She's now raising funds for Trump's inaugural committee. Quote, I think people have had enough of the, oh, Trump is really bad, we're going to pre-hate everything he does. She calls the Democrats a cult. Quote, my political friends, it's just been really bad. It's a cult. The way that they've treated me is difficult. I'm not the only donor. I'm just the only one who is a public figure and willing to speak out. Everyone else is afraid for their own necks. The reason I bring this up is not, oh, yay, great, we have based women now. No, based Chinese woman. This is just, these are the sorts of people who signal the preference cascade. So when you have the fundraiser influencer types converting to MAGA, it doesn't matter whether they're doing this sincerely, authentically, or just as a matter of preserving their careers. It's the same thing. They want to preserve their career, and they recognize that the winning side is MAGA. So they're going to realign everything to join MAGA. And it's good. It's an inevitable feature that you're going to have the soulless grifters. So here's some small updates on this story. The hostage and ceasefire deal in Gaza had nothing to do with Biden, Arab officials say. The deal today came after Trump's incoming Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff met with Netanyahu. Trump envoys swayed Netanyahu more in one meeting than Biden did all year, from the Times of Israel. As a reminder, the hostage deal will go into effect January 19th. This is one day before Trump said there will be hell to pay if a deal wasn't struck by then. Now, note this quote from Trump. This is back in December too, and this stood out to me back then. I didn't bring it up, and I didn't really think a lot about it, but it did stand out to me. He says, everybody's talking about the hostages who are being held so violently, inhumanely, and against the will of the entire world in the Middle East. But it's all talk and no action. Please let this truth serve to represent that if the hostages are not released prior to January 2025, the date that I proudly assume office as President of the United States, there will be all hell to pay in the Middle East. And for those in charge who perpetrated these atrocities against humanity. Those responsible will be hit harder than anybody has been hit in the long and storied history of the United States of America. Release the hostages now. Do you note, let me see, you guys are probably a little bit delayed behind me. Do I still have it on ultra low latency? I do. Okay, so do you note what is missing from this original post here? Everybody took this as him talking about releasing these hostages, getting them out of there. There's going to be a ceasefire. At the time that he said this, I remember people talking about it, reacting to it, as here is Trump kowtowing to Israel's demands. But note that nowhere in there does he mention anything about which hostages he's talking about. There's hostages on both sides. There's American hostages, there's Israeli hostages, there's Palestinian hostages, there's a whole bunch of hostages. And he didn't just say the Americans or the Israelis or the Palestinians. He didn't indicate at all. He just said the hostages, release the hostages. And now, today, he says, we have a deal for the hostages in the Middle East. They will be released shortly. Thank you. Anybody who has been telling you that Trump is just a patsy for Israel is not to be trusted. These are not good faith analyzers of reality. They have an axe to grind. They've got motivated reasoning, and they want hostage Americans. Volch persona. We're getting our hostage Americans home. They are not good faith actors. They may be misled. I'm not going to say that they're being malevolent, but they can't be treated as good faith actors. Now, interestingly, Joe Biden is taking credit for this hostage and ceasefire deal. And recall yesterday, the article that I read in Haaretz reported that the Biden administration had told the incoming Trump administration that they were fine letting them run point on it as long as they are stuck with, they deal with the consequences, and they're the ones who have it, who own it. So this is Biden's statement. He says, today, after many months of intensive diplomacy by the United States, along with Egypt and Qatar, Israel and Hamas have reached a ceasefire and hostage deal. This deal will halt the fighting in Gaza, surge much-needed humanitarian assistance to Palestinian civilians, and reunite the hostages with their families after more than 15 months in captivity. I laid out the precise contours of this plan on May 31, 2024, after which it was endorsed unanimously by the UN Security Council. It is the result not only of the extreme pressure that Hamas has been under in the changed regional equation after a ceasefire in Lebanon and weakening of Iran, but also of dogged and painstaking American diplomacy. My diplomacy never ceased in their efforts to get this done. Even as we welcome this news, we remember all the families whose loved ones were killed, blah, 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 many innocent people. It's long past time for fighting it. And I am also thinking of the American families, 3 of whom have living hostages in Gaza and 4 awaiting return of remains after what has been the most horrible ordeal imaginable. Under this deal, we are determined to bring all of them home. I'll speak more about this soon. For now, I am thrilled that those who have been held hostage are being reunited with their families. Then he comes out with his press conference.
And the Secretary of State. Let's listen.
Good afternoon. It's a very good afternoon, because at long last, I can announce a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas.
Look at these 2 stooges behind him. 3 stooges right here. Just playing their little parts. The little kids get to pretend they sit at the big kids' table. Pretend they're doing something serious. Pretend they're serious people. And then at the end of the press conference...
Thank you.
Brooks, credit for this, Mr. President. You or Trump?
Is that a joke? Oh, thank you.
You know, honestly, I'm going to miss some aspects of having him in public life. Is that a joke? No? Oh, okay. You know what? So then here comes a Biden administration official, and look at that frickin' schnoz, man. But note what he says.
When it comes to the involvement of President-elect Trump's team, it has been absolutely critical in getting this deal over the line. And it's been critical because, obviously, as I stand here today, this administration's term in office will expire in 5 days. And one of the things that we have always said about this deal is that when you get from stage 1 to stage 2, that the United States, Egypt, and Qatar are the guarantors of this deal. And Egypt and Qatar will push Hamas to stay at the bargaining table and to get from stage 1 to stage 2, and the United States will push Israel to stay at the bargaining table to get from phase 1 and phase 2. So obviously those are promises we cannot make on behalf of the United States for any longer than the next 5 days. And so it's critical that all of the parties to the agreement and the other mediators see that when the United States is in the room making commitments, those are lasting commitments that extend beyond this administration into the next one. I would just say, lastly, I don't know if it's unprecedented to have envoys from an outgoing and an incoming administration sitting at the same table negotiating a ceasefire agreement of this kind. But if it's not unprecedented, it's certainly unusual. And we, of course, thank the Trump team for working with this on this ceasefire agreement. We think it's important that they were at the table. And
the way that I see this is indicative of the complete breakdown across the Biden administration. There was no by the mere fact that there is no head, there's a point that Andreessen made in the interview that I'll play for you a little bit later. He says, what's the whole of government policy on Ukraine? What's the whole of government policy on technology? There is no whole of government policy on any of these things because there is no head. There's no person with whom the buck stops. You've all seen the pictures of the types of people who were populating the Oval Office, all of the president's aides and assistants and everything, and it's all a bunch of like little kids. There's no serious diplomats, statespeople, or anything. It's a bunch of little kids that like run his social media, and they're just LARPing as West Wingers. Then you've got the serious people who are out actually doing the serious stuff. And so this happens, and all the little kids around the president who run the White House, they're like, oh yeah, look, the president did it. Quick, on our way out, we got to make sure he does his press conference. And he waddles out, and he does his little press conference, waddles back in. Meanwhile, there's a spectrum here. There's the more serious actors within the administration are the ones who are actually saying things like this. And This is a continuation of this pattern. I think that there's a strong instinct to assume that all of this is coordinated evil doing, which is attributing way too much competence to a single room. When you had all these people together in the Oval Office all together at once, you could not find a less competent group of people anywhere else in the country unless you were wandering around a homeless encampment or something. We've seen the videos. We've seen what they look like when the videos leak out of James O'Keefe talking to these goobers. Okay, another story here. Indiana House Republican Caucus recently announced its intent to redraw state lines and welcome dozens of Illinois counties that want to secede from their state. Here's the article. The Indiana House Republican Caucus announced its intent on Tuesday to redraw state lines and welcome dozens of Illinois counties that want to secede from their state. To all of our neighbors to the west, we hear your frustrations, Indiana Speaker Todd Huston said. Houston, I don't know. According to Speaker Huston Houston, more than 30 Illinois counties have voted to secede from the Prairie State since 2020, with many expressing frustrations with high taxes. Instead of seceding and creating a 51st state, they should just join us, Speaker Huston Houston said. If HB 1008 passes, the Indiana General Assembly would create an Indiana-Illinois Boundary Adjustment Commission tasked with helping those Illinois counties become part of the Hoosier State. That is a process that follows a constitutional process for redrawing state boundaries, Speaker Houston Huston said. We think there might be some interest in the Illinois legislature to do that. However, in order for HB 1008 to work, the Illinois General Assembly would also need to pass a similar resolution. Very likely that doesn't happen. It could make us a laughingstock, State Rep Ed Delaney, Democrat from Indianapolis, said. According to Rep Delaney, the bill does have a chance of passing if it reaches the House floor, but he emphasized that the bill distracts from larger issues such as high property taxes and low wages. Quote, if we need more rural counties, how are we doing for the, 60 to 70 rural counties we already have where they're losing hospitals, where their schools are shrinking, Rep Delaney asked. So no, this is not a serious proposal. The bill now makes its way to the House Government and Regulatory Reform Committee, where it will receive its first hearing next Tuesday. The reason I wanted to bring this to your guys' attention, it was sent to me by a good friend of the show, Josh Ham, who is himself an Indiana resident, and so that has particular relevance to him. I think we're entering an era where we've spent the last post-war era with this weird sense of borders are just like drawn by God. Every border that exists is just the way that the world is now. And we don't redraw borders. To redraw borders is a crime against heaven, which is very obviously old British Empire propaganda. Yeah, of course, the reigning imperial power would want to have everyone believe that all the borders are drawn exactly where they're supposed to be. The only place where this sort of thing has had a lot of hubbub around it is the Middle East, where a lot of those borders are intentionally drawn in such a way as to provoke disputes over those borders. But I think what we're moving into now, the annexation of Greenland, I think has a very good chance of kicking off a run on this sort of realignment. And if all it's going to take is a single region in the United States to agree to redraw some state borders for one reason or another, and with some of the economic shit that's coming down the pike, that there may not be a choice in the matter. So, for example, I'm not speaking of this in particular, but just to kind of illustrate what I'm saying, in order for this particular agenda item to follow through, you have to get the Illinois legislature to agree to cede that part. Well, what incentive do they have to do that? Well, what happens if in a similar situation, whatever the state is that would normally want to give that up, gets their backs completely up against the wall economically, and the only way that they're going to be able to survive and maintain their power is by selling off some of their territory and being compensated for that, because that's a stream of revenue that they could generate. I think that the government of California may very likely get bought out by the federal government in one way or another. I think we're moving into an age now where over the next somewhere between 10 and 50 years, a lot of borders are going to get redrawn, whether within the states or outside the states. We've re-entered a time for territorial expansion. And part of this is history. Human history goes through these. You can think of it as like a breathing, like a person breathing in and out, in and out, and in and out, and in and out. So you go through the time of expansion, which we've obviously been in if you pick one word to just kind of like overarchingly describe the spirit of the last better part of a century, we've been in an age of expansion. But now we're beginning an age of contraction. And I think as that age of contraction, retrenchment is a word you're probably going to be hearing more and more, especially in the geopolitical arena. More and more retrenchment is going to be accompanied by territorial expansion. Because to retrench, some of the weakest powers are going to have to cede territory in order to retrench. Where's that going to be ceded? It's going to be ceded to wealthier people. Like in every recession, people think recession and they go, oh, everybody loses money. But money doesn't get lost. It gets reallocated. So one person's money loss is another person's money gain. One person's territory loss is another person's territory gain. One person's capital loss is another person's capital gain. So as we go through the turmoil of that really begins this year and extends on for a time in the future, keep in mind that there were people in the Great Depression who amassed untold amounts of wealth and set up their future generations, their descendants for generations. So just because there's an economic crisis happening doesn't mean that everyone is universally experiencing it the same way or being affected by it in the same way. And it sounds bad, like to say, oh, I made lots of money while everyone else was losing money. Sounds bad, but what's the alternative? Everybody losing money? Well, that doesn't happen. Ultimately, the bad stuff has to be offset by some good stuff. So if everyone's going to, if lots and lots of people are economically struggling, then you have to have people who are economically successful. You don't want that economic success to come at the expense of the people struggling. But we're in a liminal space now. We're in a transitionary phase for the next decade or two, maybe more. Could happen quickly, could happen over the course of a decade. And while we're in this liminal phase, we got to be nimble. We got to be agile. We can't allow ourselves to get locked in on a particular frame and have and get left behind, so to speak. Okay, let's keep this going. So this lady here, wonderful, wonderful accent. Makes a very interesting point.
Over the last couple of months, I've had so many people saying to me, oh, what a waste of sheep's wool. So unfortunately in Ireland, sheep's wool is basically worth nothing, and it probably costs more for the farmer on diesel to drive to this location where they have to get rid of the sheep's wool. And if I didn't take this sheep's wool off the farmer, it would have probably ended up straight in the landfill. And I don't know about you, but I think this is better off being here used as a garden mulch and as a fertiliser than it is being in the landfill. And then you've got the clothing industry, where you've got all sorts of man-made materials like your polyester, your spandex and nylon and so on. When you've got sheep's wool like this that farmers can't get rid of. I'll never understand it, why they have us basically wearing plastic when they have all this natural material all around us where they're not using it. And you have to remember, when we're wearing natural materials like your wool, cotton, silk, hemp and all that good stuff, there's high vibrations coming off these materials. But when we're wearing basically plastic, anything that's man-made, there's negative and low vibrations coming off them materials. What does that do for our aura, our own energy levels? I think we should be very mindful as to what we're wearing, what we're sleeping in, and yeah.
This young lady is onto something. Because look at all that. Look at all that wool back there. They would have just been basically thrown away. What I see right here, I see a fantastic economic opportunity. And it may not be viable for the poor Europors, but I'd imagine that there's something similar going on in the U.S. And what she's saying here at the end, the anti-vibrational effects of the synthetic clothing and materials and everything that we use is absolutely 100% true. And when I say that 2025 is going to be the year that the conventional model of physics gets BTFO'd, this is one of the things that I'm talking about. We absolutely do have an electromagnetic aura around us that is absolutely interfered with by things like sleeping in a bunch of polyester or wearing a bunch of polyester clothing or drinking out of plastic containers. I've got my plastic container right here that I drink out of. All of these things collectively are absolutely stealing from our vibe, harshing our mellow. And nobody takes it seriously because we have this busted, weird model of physics that says that we're just these. It's hyper materialist. We're just these little individual, isolated atoms that are. There's a bunch of empty space around us, and this is all completely broken, and it's going to change. It's going to change by sheer inevitability, in large part because the people who begin acting as if that's the case, they begin living in the world that they imagine to be, which I think is much closer to the actual reality, managing things like the frequencies that they expose their body to, and being mindful of the effects of not just like chemicals on your hormones, but the electromagnetic frequencies that you surround yourself with, and how you have your own innate frequencies. The people who begin managing that, paying attention to it, and cleansing their harmonic environment, are going to become more and more successful and prosperous, and they're going to thrive more. That's one point. The other point is, if all of this, so the increasing awareness of this reality is going to increase demand for natural fibers, for natural products. So if there's someone out there that has I don't know, a little bit of work ethic in them, they could start going around and gathering up all of this wool that's being that's just going to get thrown away, and capitalize on this waste product, find the value in the waste product, and begin monetizing it, and use the profit mechanism to drive this positive habit into people. You can get a nice positive feedback loop from that. So here's some commentary from Bo Camaro. It says, I've spoken on this before, but this young lady is correct. A couple years ago, I started really looking around at our world, and what I realized is that we spend a ton of money on quality items or designer items that are actually crap. Everything you own is fake or total crap. What do I mean? All of your furniture is wood dust held together by glue. It's chips and flakes pressed into a sheet. It falls apart. It's trash. Your clothes are plastic fibers that are designed to handle a year or so of washes, and then they're done. Your shoes are plastic and foam trash now. Even your luxury goods are fake leather or the cheapest leather on earth. We've lost our way as a society. We no longer buy goods created by craftsmen that will last. We buy cheap stamped forks and spoons. We buy crap glassware, and on and on. Everything is mass-produced and made to look the part, but fails after a short time. I wish our society started putting true craftsmanship and real quality back to the number one thing. Back where we demanded that our products be made by someone who cared about their craft. Anyway, it's 5 a.m. and I'm babbling, but you get my point. Go look around your house and ask yourself if anything you own is actually real and of decent quality. I know my house only has a few things that would count. This part right here. I wish our society started putting true craftsmanship and real quality back to the number one thing, back where we demanded that our products be made by someone who cared about their craft. In order for this to happen, people have to start doing it. It sounds like a truism. It is. In order for the society to start putting true craftsmanship and real quality back to the number one thing, society has to start putting true craftsmanship and real quality back to being the number one thing. So you need craftsmen who are dedicated to true craftsmanship and real quality. No matter how difficult it is, no matter how how unprofitable it might be, you have to figure out a way to make it profitable, to make it scalable. And I think natural economic incentives, cycles, are going to drive us to the point where local craftsmen supplying goods to their local communities becomes a thing again. We've gone through this whole like multinational globalist outsource everything, drive the margins as try to maximize your margins by trying to drive costs as low as possible. And we've seen where that's getting us. So we're gonna get forced back into this, whether we want to or not. The people who start doing it ahead of time, the people who start doing it before the demand exists, are the ones who are going to be the most successful. More on related subjects in a little bit. Here's a clip from when I told you guys that there's going to be some blackpilling stuff in here, stuff that isn't necessarily a spirit lifter. Here's one of them.
Because all it would have taken is $5 billion, and they accidentally paid an extra $6 billion to Ukraine. They're like, don't worry, just a mistake. There's an accidental $6 billion.
What, to help Maui?
Yeah, rebuild entirely. So for $5 billion, everyone could have got their home back, and everything could have been settled. And no, nothing's been done. But yet we keep sending money to these other countries.
Well, how come why don't these countries throw us a buck every now and then? All we've been doing is paying their bills for the last 78 years.
Here's the thing. Even if you are supporting the idea of sending money to Ukraine, I'm not arguing against that. I'm saying they accidentally sent $6 billion there, and no one cared. And they didn't send $5 billion to Maui.
Right.
And they could have.
Also, just get it back. Like, it's not actually, you're not shipping a big thing of money. Just like.
Because all it would have taken is $5.
When you put it like that, $5 billion to rebuild Maui, and they accidentally paid an extra $6 billion to Ukraine. The numbers on this are maddening. If you listen, if you start looking into them, and the Trump administration is going to have some extremely low-hanging fruit, and they need to pluck that low-hanging fruit. Because we can't live like this. We can't live where we've got poor and middle-class families in Western North Carolina sleeping in tents when it's 15 degrees outside because they were given a $750 loan from FEMA, while billions are being funneled into this, to the billions of dollars going to Ukraine. It's not for the Ukrainians. It's not for the war effort. It's not for trying to beat the Russians back. Those are like tangential operations at this point. Those billions going to Ukraine are to pay off bondholders to keep the UK economy from crashing. That's what that money is for, ultimately. This is the height of corruption and criminality. And the Trump administration needs to address this. There needs to be a big push, whether through FEMA or through working around FEMA or whatever. I don't care if you have to print the money to deal with the effects down the line. Americans in Western North Carolina and Southern California, someone needs to step in and help them. If it's not going to be the federal government, it's going to have to be someone. It's going to be easiest if it's just the federal government. Inflation, whatever. the numbers that we're dealing with at this point are so astronomical. What's an extra 10 billion here or there? But it's going to make a huge difference to the people on the ground. So speaking of California, Yoon Ta Tsai, senior staff engineer at Tesla, says, I just got home. The first thing my wife asked me seriously to get a gun license. Is that bad? Then she showed me all the text messages from her friends in West LA with all the chaos right now. We've got Southern Californians wanting guns. This is going to just wait till they go through that process. Just wait till all of these soccer moms and urbane bourgeois lib moms in California are like, oh shit, we need a gun to protect ourselves from all of this wonderful diversity we've surrounded ourselves with. And then they start going through the whole rigmarole of getting a gun in California. We've only just begun, folks. And here's Newscum's folly. Today, from Gavin Newsom, I signed an executive order prohibiting greedy land developers from ripping off LA wildfire victims with unsolicited, undervalued offers to buy their destroyed property. Make no mistake, this is a prosecutable crime. Comic book level villainy. So these homeowners, this is one of the things I don't want to step on his toes too much. So go listen to Jason Miranchuk when he talks about this. Hopefully he does a stream tonight. These homeowners have their property. They've paid exorbitant taxes to have their wonderful property protected. They've paid exorbitant amounts of insurance to have all of their property protected. And we're not just talking homes, we're talking cars, vintage cars, expensive supercars, art collections, jewelry, businesses, all sorts of stuff. Copious loads of insurance because rich people pay for their insurance. Now, there's going to be a mass wave of insurance claims all at the same time. That's already officially probably in the vicinity of $200 or $300 billion right now, officially. And there's maybe $2 or $3 billion actually on hand available to address that. Go listen to Jason when he talks about this. Because interestingly, the reinsurance market is dominated by a couple of German firms, among others. Germany, that beacon of economic prosperity in 2025. So all these people, they lose all of their property. They've paid copious amounts in taxes and insurance for years. They're going to get the whole runaround with insurance, if they could get the insurance to pay out. Then they've got to go through the whole process of navigating the California bureaucracies to try to get building permits and that whole headache. And then they go, fuck it. Forget it. I don't want this anymore. I just want to sell the house, get whatever I can, sell the property, this burned, charred hole in the ground. That's part of the process is they're going to have to replace a bunch of topsoil, probably have to wait a period of time before they can rebuild for environmental reasons or whatever. And they're like, I don't want this headache anymore. Just want to sell the house. Give me some money for it. And let me go on with my life. I don't want to be tethered to this anymore. Those are the people who have the luxury of that. And now, Gavin Newsom, who fucked this whole thing up in the first place, is going to say, no, you can't sell your house. You can't sell your charred, burned property. It's illegal for you to sell your property and get out of this whole headache. If Gavin Newsom survives the next year, literally drawing breath, it's going to be a miracle. And I am 100% not advocating that. I'm not an advocate of violence. I do not advocate vigilante justice. But this dude is lining himself up in the crosshairs. Because here, unsolicited, undervalued offers. So solicited, properly valued offers. I wonder who's going to solicit those offers. I wonder what properly valued is going to be. Because someone's going to get their exception to this rule. Someone's going to get their special carve-out. Will be presented in some sort of humanitarian terms. I'm sure probably a few months from now it'll flip around and he'll be lambasting people for not bailing these people out or something. Yelling at the problem that he created. So this woman here, when Elon said, "You are the media now," that was true in more ways than one. This woman here, Avery Warwick, I interviewed a Los Angeles firefighter with 20 plus years of service. The truths I found are harrowing. Gavin Newsom ordered the removal of Elon Musk from the command post and ordered the Cal Fire firefighters to return all donated Starlinks. Elon Musk showed up, brought a bunch of Cybertrucks with a whole bunch of Starlinks so they could actually communicate there, and Gavin Newsom ordered his removal from the command post and told them to return all the donated Starlinks. There's a number of videos here. I'm just going to play. The link will be on the King Pill Substack if you want to go watch it. Watch the whole thing. She's got her transcript of the interview she did, but I'm going to play this video right here.
The firefighters that I spoke with told me that Gavin Newsom directed the removal of Elon Musk from the command post where he was live streaming with that battalion chief. Gavin Newsom told him to leave. Kicked Elon out for trying to help. It doesn't end there. Gavin Newsom also ordered the Cal Fire firefighters to return and not accept the donated Starlinks by order of the governor. Now, I've been told by firefighters on the ground that Starlink has directly impacted the success of fighting these fires through improving communication methods. I'm sure we've all seen by now that Gavin has posted, "Elon Musk's lies exposed by firefighters on the ground. Leave it to Gavin to politicize a tragedy and attack the man that was trying to help." So let's back up. What was Elon doing at the command post, the Los Angeles Fire Department command post? He was helping. He found out that these firefighters were going 24, 36, 48 hours on end with no way to communicate. They had no signal, and they couldn't communicate with each other or their families. So Elon was told that they were looking for more Starlink and, of course, said, "How can I help?" Elon shows up with 17 Cybertrucks full of Starlink, food, water, resources for these firefighters. And I know that Elon got briefed privately by a firefighter on the ground telling him that they didn't have water in the Pacific Palisades, which was why he asked the battalion chief about this in the live stream. Here.
That along the, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, in Malibu along the coast, there was no shortage of water.
Yes.
In the Palisades, there was a shortage of water at a certain point. Or is that not
accurate? Well, we were flowing just an amount of water that the system couldn't overbear.
Skirt.
Just because of how much water these firefighters were utilizing.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
So what you don't know is that battalion chief who skirted that question has career aspirations and has to play this political game that is set by Gavin Newsom in pushing out this narrative that there was water because they are trying to save face. However, I spoke with an active Los Angeles firefighter who told me, and I quote, "If we had access to more water in the Palisades, we could have saved more homes." So get this. The firefighters that I spoke with told me that Gavin Newsom directed the removal of Elon Musk from the command post where he was live streaming with that battalion chief. Gavin Newsom told him to leave. Kicked Elon out for trying to help. It doesn't end there. Gavin Newsom also ordered the Cal Fire firefighters to return and not accept the donated Starlinks by order of the governor. Now, I've been told directly by firefighters on the ground that Starlink has directly impacted the success of fighting these fires through improving communication methods. What I've also learned is the reality that both Elon and this battalion chief are right. It's true that no water system is set up to fight this kind of fire, but they're not meant to. Water systems aren't meant to fight this kind of fire. But more water could have saved the homes in the Palisades. That's also fact. But Gavin's weak attempt to politicize this and lie about the causes of this tragedy is pathetic. He is trying to save face and attack the man that is trying to help, a man that employs tens of thousands of people in his state. And he's going to attack him for his own political gain. Gavin has created an environment where these firefighters are fearful to tell the truth because they don't want to lose their jobs. But why would we be surprised? We've seen this before when COVID happened and Gavin fired firefighters for not getting the vaccine. He punished them for having a difference of opinion. And this was recently, might I add. So why would we be surprised that he's going to do it again? Now, unlike Newscum, I am in the pursuit of truth. So I have taken it upon myself to interview a few of these brave firefighters that have put their lives on the line to contain and extinguish these fires. And the truths I have found are harrowing.
So she goes into more detail on the water issue in this longer video, 8 minutes long. So there's a little bit of repetition of information. But one of the points here is that Malibu didn't run out of water. Palisades did. And there was a number of reasons for it. Did she mention it in here? Yeah. The fire department was not consulted on the draining of the Palisades reservoir, which, as a matter of plain reported fact, was empty. The fire department was not consulted on that, which there's a couple of dikes running the place. Probably if they had consulted them, it wouldn't have made a difference. There were insufficient hydrants in the Palisades. They were too far apart, and they were the incorrect diameter for sufficient water flow. So just completely outdated infrastructure. The legal liability that comes away from this. The power companies. One of the big fires several years ago, PG&E got sued for their liability. I think it had to do with not shutting off the power to certain areas and the power lines just sparking and causing more fires, which is exactly what was happening here. The legal liability for the fire department, for the state and federal government, for the power companies. This is going to be one of the most costly events in human history when all is said and done. The FBI informant says these people are a legit national security risk. He says, I don't know. I really don't think it's hyperbole at this point to have the military take control of California and have her under an emergency military governorship until further notice. That's what I'm saying. When I say that I think the federal government may have to bail out California, the California government, I'm not saying that they're just going to give them a bunch of money. The federal government may have to purchase California and govern it. Talk about a regime change. I wouldn't think that that's even conceivably feasible with most administrations. This incoming one, I don't know. There's going to be a lot more things on the table. This whole thing is it's just staggering. You're used to seeing evil, incompetent people, especially in places like California. But this sheer mashup of evil and incompetence is just staggering. This woman's interesting. Never heard of her before until I saw Elon signal boosting that tweet that I was just sharing with you guys. Avery Warwick. She's got 6,000 followers. When I first saw this video and saved it last night, I think it was last night, she had 2,500 followers. Passionate about America, dogs, and DOGE, North Carolina. That's interesting. But here she is. So we've got some woman with basically no following on X. Maybe she's got a big TikTok following. I don't know. But she's got connections where she could start interviewing some of these guys behind the scenes and leaking that information out. Oh, look at that. Elon happens to signal boost it to 18 million views. Huh. Wonder how that happened. So here's this piece from at Riva Tez. She's tech and philosophy. She's been popular among the this sort of Silicon Valley milieu that I've followed for quite a while now. There's a number of good woman posters there. She's one of them. She says, I expanded on the horrors of California's government for The Spectator. It's much worse than you think. And here is the article. The slow death of the California dream. The Romans built aqueducts stretching hundreds of miles in less time than it takes to permit an outbuilding in California, and their aqueducts actually held water. Thousands of Californians have lost their homes and livelihoods to an ongoing inferno. I write this while tracking the flames approaching my property. For many of us, the fires are both a natural disaster and a deathly reminder of the catastrophic consequences of government incompetence. A government that has promised to protect and serve us has proven itself to be woefully unprepared and grossly inept in the face of crisis. Amidst the Californian ashes, anger and frustration are growing. The consequences of the Los Angeles fire are not entirely shocking. They serve as a grim confirmation of a long-standing trend. For nearly a decade, California has been trotting down a path of self-destruction, rejecting all affinity for competence in favor of ideological dogma. The results are catastrophic. Planes crashing, industries faltering, many lives being ruined. It's a scenario eerily reminiscent of the dystopian world depicted in Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. It's a book Californians love to dismiss as an unrealistic tale while they ironically live through a real-life adaptation of its darkest and most violent scenes. A society in decline, crippled by the weight of its incompetence and beset on all sides by the consequences of its folly. Rather than acknowledging the complex, nuanced issues that have led to the destruction, it's easier for our leaders to blame climate change. This convenient scapegoat allows Democrats to shift blame onto Republicans to absolve themselves of responsibility. Climate change is a pressing issue, yet it doesn't explain away California's problems. California's state leaders no doubt hope to avoid accountability by portraying themselves as victims of circumstance. Again, taking a page from Rand's villains. This storyline is dishonest at best and evil at worst. Empty fire hydrants, crumbling infrastructure, uncleared bush, and rampant poverty cannot be attributed to global warming. Californians should be angry because much of this was preventable. The root of the problem lies in our apathy towards local and state politics, which long ago devolved into a spectacle of emotional theatrics. Our self-congratulatory virtue signaling created a smokescreen for corruption to flourish. Now even the most basic infrastructure, like LA's fire hydrants and reservoirs, lie dormant and dry. Petitions are being collected for LA's mayor, Karen Bass, to resign. Bass's deputy, Brian K. Williams, is currently under FBI investigation. It's a toss-up as to whether the FBI or the politician is the more nefarious actor in such a story, but it raises a disturbing question. What happened to California? This quintessential liberal haven has long been a bastion of progressive ideals. For decades, the golden... What has happened? What has happened to California? The quintessential liberal haven has long been a bastion of progressive ideals. There you go. For decades, the Golden State has championed the glamour of Hollywood and the innovation of Silicon Valley, attracting some of the most influential Democratic donors who embody the state's ethos of feigned, guilt-ridden luxury and liberalism. Its governors, often charismatic figures with a flair for the dramatic, have ranged from boy band-esque politicians to quite literally a former bodybuilder. Ironically, perhaps the most effective of the bunch. California embodies a particular brand of progressivism, one that promises a utopian vision of democracy and equality, but makes a mockery of the former and never comes close to the latter. 2 days ago, I highlighted some data about the state's failures in a post on X. A retweet from Elon Musk sent the post viral, racking up 30 million views and drawing the ire of leftist fact-checkers who descended like a swarm of locusts. Their mission was to discredit the claims, demonstrate that Musk had reposted misinformation, and reassure the faithful that their sunny democratic utopia remains untarnished. One statistic in particular touched a nerve: California's poverty rate. The fact-checkers were apoplectic, insisting that the Golden State's poverty rate was not, in fact, the highest in the country, but lower than many other states. After all, to acknowledge the truth about California's poverty would be to admit that the state's progressive policies have failed. I don't begrudge those who came after me armed with conflicting statistics and a zeal to discredit. Accurately assessing poverty rates is daunting even for the most well-intentioned. The internet can be a minefield with search engines and AI chatbots spewing contradictory results. Like most things, the truth about California's poverty rate is nuanced, requiring a willingness to dig deeper. The U.S. Census Bureau has a dual framework for measuring poverty. On the one hand, we have the official poverty measure, OPM, a relic of the mid-1960s that relies solely on cash resources and has remained frozen in time, like a fossil from a bygone era. Its anachronistic language, 3 times the cost of a minimum food diet in 1963, speaks to its limitations, a quaint artifact of a time when a gallon of milk cost 50 cents and a postage stamp cost 5. It's a measure that's more nostalgic than nuanced. In the 2010s, the Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics joined forces to develop a more comprehensive metric, the Supplemental Poverty Measure, SPM. Supplemental because nothing in government ever goes away, it merely accumulates. Unlike its vestigial counterpart, the SPM considers a broader range of data, including living costs, cash and non-cash benefits, and necessary expenses such as taxes and medical expenses. This contemporary approach acknowledges the vast disparities in the cost of living across the country, rendering a more accurate portrait of poverty. The distinction between the two measures is striking. According to the official poverty measure, Louisiana and Mississippi top the nation in poverty rates. However, when viewed through the lens of the supplemental poverty measure, California emerges as the state with the highest poverty rate for the 2021 to 2023 period, a position it's consistently held or been close to since the Census Bureau began reporting SPM data back in 2011. For those fact-checkers who would like to dispute this claim, I recommend consulting the Census Bureau's publication, Poverty in the United States, released last year. The paradox of California's poverty should be more jarring. A state that boasts one of the wealthiest economies on the planet, yet is home to a staggering number of people living in poverty. It's a microcosm of the United States. In 2024, California's gross state product reached $4.08 trillion, which would rank it as the fourth largest economy in the world if it were a nation, eclipsing Germany. To put that into perspective, California's output is nearly on par with that of India. What an interesting nation to choose. A country with a population that is more than 30 times larger. It's a disparity that raises fundamental questions about the fabric of California's economy and society. By all accounts, California should be a winner, a beacon of prosperity and opportunity, where the American dream is within reach of anyone willing to work hard. But despite its wealth and resources, California is failing to deliver on its promise of a better life for its citizens. The poverty that exists here is an indictment of a fundamentally broken system. If high progressive taxes led to greater equality, California wouldn't have the worst poverty rate in America. 46% of California's roads are in a state of disrepair, despite an annual highway budget that exceeds $21 billion. This ranking, third worst in the nation, is a far cry from the pristine road quality found in states like New Hampshire, which manages to maintain its roads with a significantly more modest budget and no state income tax. The San Francisco Bay Area, where 71% of roads were rated poor by Teletrack Navman, is one of the world's most prosperous regions, with a gross domestic product of approximately $800 billion. The oft-repeated refrain of "who will build the roads," that favorite sarcastic question by government apologists to those more libertarian-minded, takes on a particularly ironic tone in California. Taxpayers are forced to hand over their hard-earned income to an entity that seems more adept at squandering funds on bureaucratic boondoggles and sweetheart deals than on maintaining the most basic infrastructure. The real question is not who will build the roads, but rather who will hold the government accountable for its embarrassing performance in this task. Unlike the market discipline of the private sector, nobody does. California's education and public safety records are also abysmal. Despite devoting 50% of the state's general fund to education, with the main share going to K-12, only 50% of students meet or exceed reading standards, consistently lagging behind the national average. Meanwhile, crime is spiraling out of control, with violent offenses surging 15.4% since 2019, homicides up 15.5%, and assaults 27.4% higher than pre-pandemic levels, according to the Public Policy Institute of California. Gavin Newsom's proposed budget for 2025 to 2026 is $322 billion, surpassing even initial estimates. Many Californians missed our governor's stealthy tax hike last year, increasing California's top marginal income tax rate from 13.3% to 14.4%. This move, aimed at funding an expansion of paid family leave, is a thinly veiled attempt to plug the holes in California's crumbling fiscal ship. These are the long-standing trends, and any observer can't be too surprised at the consequences of this wildfire. If a natural disaster had been handled competently, it would have been an outlier for the Californian government. It's time for Californians to shake off their complacency and demand a reckoning from those who are supposed to govern. For too long, we've tolerated a system that squanders our hard-earned wealth and is now destroying our property. The Romans built aqueducts stretching hundreds of miles in less time than it takes to permit an outbuilding in California, and their aqueducts actually held water. We deserve better stewardship of our finances and better management of our resources. The time for timid reform, in which the government only gets bigger, is over. Californians must rise and reclaim our golden state from the deathly and devastating grip of endless bureaucratic cancer. When I've been telling you guys that there is ample appetite within the Silicon Valley world for for a complete regime change, these are the sorts of people I'm talking about. Peter Thiel, it's so iconic now, thinking back to Peter Thiel on Rogan talking about California and the trajectory that it's on. There's a great opportunity now for really. I posted this in Jason's chat last night, but this crisis is going to be a massive. It's going to result in a massive capital reallocation from those who are most over-leveraged to those who are most liquid. And I'll leave that for you to figure out who is who. My wife says, spending 10 years working in LAUSD is why Eastwood is being homeschooled. Ordered the curriculum tomorrow. All right. Let's talk about the bootstraps discourse a little more. Got some good thoughts from some of the best guys I know on the internet. First one here, Harry Bergeron at Tysonberg. He says if a bunch of 20-year-old kids are blackpilling and saying it's over and nothing's going to work out, don't tell them things are great and they're delusional. Give them tough love with homophobic slurs peppered in like we've done for millennia. And he continues. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Yeah. This is the Trump we deserve. He says re-upping for Zoomers. Blackpilling is anti-white. Setbacks occur, but despair can't accompany them. You were selected by your ancestors' ability to endure harsh winters. Premature sorrow betrays your nature. You're literally built to thrive in hostile environments. Act like it. Faggot. I added that because of the homophobic slurs, Being betrayed by your own society before you could lift a finger in your defense is different evolutionary pressure than what northern climates applied to its populations. But they didn't survive a literal ice age just for you to perish in a metaphorical one. You can make it. Despair is gay. Blackpilling is faggotry. No matter how bad things get, you are genetically wired to survive massive crises. This, another one from Deadly New Right, at New Right Post. He says, when I was young, dumb, and full of Ayn Rand, which is just, that is how you start a post. When I was young, dumb, and full of Ayn Rand, I found Americans who sought to protect their gerbs from hardworking immigrants to be lazy and pathetic. I grew up poor, so I naturally admired those who risked everything and worked until they collapsed every day. I figured they deserved whatever success they earned more than the soft, rich whites I knew. But upon having kids, a lot of things fell into place for me. I realized I wasn't the result of a genetic lottery. I'm the result of every decision ever made by my parents and their parents and so on. And the society that I was born into is part of my birthright as an American. Even if I'd been born rich, at some point in my ancestral line, there was a guy who risked everything, deferred pleasure, and worked his ass off to make a dime so that I, to some degree or another, wouldn't have to risk, defer, or work my ass off. Libs can't wrap their minds around this because they, blank slatists that they are, think God rolls the dice and you pop out of your mother's womb with random stats like in Dungeons and Dragons. They see every person as an isolated individual economic actor randomly plopped by a stork onto the globe, into the US or Rwanda, so you have no right to expect anything more out of life than anybody else on the planet. They see rich kids and Nepo babies as cheaters. You didn't earn that. You didn't build that. Just the luck of the draw. These freakazoids literally want to make wealth inheritance illegal, which would be the ultimate progressive victory, the mythical level playing field. Of course, they'll never have it without having to spill a lot of blood because it runs counter to humanity's central biological drive. I realized at some point in my journey out of the libertarian mind prison that even if it was possible, I wouldn't want a level playing field. Parents should tilt the odds in favor of their children. Like everyone in history up till the boomers, I want my kids to work less than I did for more. It's not fair. It's not even the cherished BoomerCon equality of opportunity. But it's basically the reason every single one of your ancestors got up in the morning, to tilt the playing field just a bit to make life easier for you. So you wouldn't have to work at Chipotle. So you wouldn't need to compete for scraps with an infinite stream of the lowest possible time preference person on earth. Someone who spent his life living off $2 a day. God love him. I hope that guy makes it. I hope all his people make it someday. But I want them to try over there. This stuff isn't clear cut. We need a trickle of fresh blood for American dynamism. It's undeniable that some immigrants have given the U.S. much more than they've taken and have made indelible contributions to the messy and beautiful American story. Very few of us can trace our heritage to the Mayflower. By the way, Chris Rufo isn't directionally wrong on the bootstrap stuff either. Some of you MFs would be lucky to manage a Chipotle and should jump at the chance if one of these 100K jobs actually exists. You could live a decent life like that. Plenty of people do. Almost none of us are too good for fast food. Sorry, we're not all temporarily embarrassed aristocrats. But some of you are, and that's okay. Some of you really are too good for Chipotle and should aim higher. Maybe it's you, the chud, reading this. Anyway, you can admire hardworking immigrants at the individual level, but it's okay to send most of them back and wish them well in their future endeavors. Your ancestors spent centuries battling entropy so they could one day carve out a slice of heaven on Earth. They didn't do that so you'd have to outgrind everyone on the planet to have a piece of it. By all means, pull those bootstraps and yank them hard. But that pretty safe neighborhood, that high-trust society, that prosperous industry, they made it for you. They gave it to you. It's your birthright, Anon. Claim it. A banger, I say. An absolute banger. And let me make sure. Drop that off. Related thought here. This from Catholic Space Emperor. Just get a 100K job at Panda Express, Anon. And here's all these H-1Bs. Panda Express, area coach of operation and training, $91,000 in Seaside. Manager, $78,000 in Yonkers. Training leader, $75,000 in Rossford, Ohio. However, this is a very good point. Yeah, just get a 100K job at Panda Express. Well, look who they're bringing in. This is going to end, by the way. But the corollary to this very good point is that actual Americans are not and cannot be too good for these jobs. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, oh, they're taking our jobs. Down with H-1B. They're not just bringing in the highly competent ones. They're bringing in Panda Express workers. They're bringing in gas station workers. Those jobs should go to Americans. How dare you tell me to work at a gas station? How dare you tell me to work at Chipotle? I'm better than that. You can't have it both ways. That's not to say the go get a job at Chipotle guys. All right, I think Chris Rufo is a goofball. But you can't be mad about this happening and also claim that these jobs are too good for you or your people, and your people should not be doing these jobs. Those don't go together. Mr. Papal Orthodoxy, Catholic Orthodoxy, Papal Orthodoxy, Catholic Orthodoxy, also known as Politically Catholic, who shows up in the chat here every now and then. Longtime followers of the show will know him as Populibs. I love this tweet from him. That's right, CG Constantine. Remember, you have to have two ideas in your head at the same time. Everything true and false about the arguments from both sides of the bootstraps discussion comes from the fact that both sides haven't truly accepted that younger generations, largely through no fault of their own, are much less prosperous than the boomers. Zoomers don't want to accept unfulfilling dead-end jobs because they're still holding on to false hope that they can attain the American dream. They need to accept their fate and steel their hearts to change things so that their kids don't share their fate. We're not going to have it as good as our parents. It sucks, but it is what it is. We make things right, not by repaying the boomers' evil with evil. They'll probably die before we get the chance. But by using our gifts to pay it forward to our kids so that they don't share our fate. The American dream skipped us. It doesn't have to skip Gen Alpha and Gen Bravo. Boomers, on the other hand, can't accept that it's entirely their fault that the nation is as fucked as it is and are incorrigibly living in denial. Boomers stole their children's bootstraps and very selfishly squandered the American dream. God will surely judge them harshly for their choices in purgatory, if not hell, but Zoomers and millennials need to accept that they won't be their parents' judges in life or death. Any actions taken in that direction are pointless. Cut the boomers off and move on. Spinning our wheels ruminating in frustration against them is fruitless. Work hard enough and maybe we will get a chance to cut the boomers' Medicare and Social Security budgets before they kick the bucket. Probably not, but it's realistically possible. Buckle down and bootstrap, not because you're going to get the same results as the boomers, but because you don't want to become your parents. You actually don't want the boomers' level of success because what they possess was stolen from their children. Just perfectly stated. Now, I will say, within the cut the boomers off and move on, also don't forget Jason's befriend a boomer idea. Cut them off and move on means stop expecting something from them. I don't know if that's what Andrew necessarily means, but I'm saying that I'm inserting this for him. Stop expecting them to fix this problem. Stop expecting them to take responsibility for what their generation did. Stop expecting them to solve this problem. We have to solve this problem. And we don't solve this problem by just laying all the blame on them and bludgeoning them for it and crucifying them. That mechanism was broken 2,000 years ago. You have to love the boomers. You have to redeem the boomers because of the evil that their generation has wrought. Not in spite of it, but because of it. And a follow-on from this, Trey 50 Daniel here says, this is why I say you should become a good sacrifice. He has this Substack post that I'm going to read for you now from Trey's Think Tank. Being a good sacrifice. Many are called, few are chosen. Occasionally, I can wax extra poetic. It might be that my grandfather wanted me to read classic poems like If by Rudyard Kipling, among others. God rest his soul. I don't mean that I actually write poetry, though, but that I find some meaning or phrasing that I really feel that embodies who and what it is that I am. I could start with my basic characteristics and career to describe myself, sure, but what I've been yearning to understand over the past few years is what it is that I truly am as a man in this fallen world. I was born a millennial, depending on how you qualify that, and I embody that personification much in my interests and who I've become. I went to college, graduated with a degree in STEM, and then went on to work with computers. That's about as millennial as it gets, but it doesn't describe me or who it is that I am. What is my purpose is a phrase I've uttered to myself many a time in this world that has stripped people of all meaning and connection. As a Christian, many people just tell me to spread the gospel or to invite people to partake in God's kingdom. But I don't think that that's all our purpose can be. Sure, we're required to do our part and do these things, but is that all that we must do to find meaning? Why would I have children then? What's the point of continuing my lineage if all God wants is for me to serve him? Maybe I should just go become a monk or something and see what all blessings God will give me for doing his work and only his work. Forget a job and career, since all meaning is only derived from being involved in God's kingdom. I may as well throw that in the ashes of history and start anew. I'm being somewhat pedantic, sure, but you can see why these definitions are insufficient for my life journey and my spiritual journey. I have 2 young children, and to say that they're a blessing would be an understatement. We have some fun moments. I laugh often when we're playing together, and I'm trying my level best to instill in them the joy that I would have liked to have as a child and occasionally did experience. I'm also teaching them things along the way that my parents never informed me about. When my son comes to me and sees me doing work or doing any activity like using tools to fix something, if he asks a question, I try to provide an answer that I feel he's capable of receiving. This may be a bit tedious, but it's something required if I want him to be a capable and skilled individual who can contribute to the betterment of our world. I can't withhold knowledge or anything from him because he is owed it. Yes, I'm saying that he is entitled to it. That's something that was lost in previous generations. We came to believe so much in the individual, and many still do, that we forgot about servitude to our fellow man. We still fake it, sure, like I gave some homeless guy $20 the other day, but it's not real. It has no meaning. We know the homeless guy probably blows that money on booze anyway right after we leave him, but it feels good and gives some moral superiority. Contrary to a total stranger, this is your very children, the seed planted for the next generation. If you don't believe that you need to give them anything, you're sorely mistaken, as that's one of your primary requirements to even be a parent. Many think it starts and stops with making sure they're fed and clothed. They point to the verse where Jesus is talking about, and I'm paraphrasing, when I was hungry, thou hast fed me. When I was naked, thou hast clothed me. This is not all your duty to your children is, and it's easy to fall into this trapping because our individualist world does cherish individual achievement, believing it is all done on one's own. We need to shatter this false god in our minds, though, because it's not real. No one makes it on their own, period. End of story. No amount of working hard or any other garbage that's been spewed endlessly at you to get you to shut up matters. Many people who are successful are there because people believed in them and that they should be there. They wouldn't be there otherwise. It's a meme that they do I want to thank the Academy, my friends and my family, and X, Y, and Z, but it's true. No man is an island unto himself. With that out of the way, I'm just trying to illustrate the point that I believe that investing in my children is a worthwhile endeavor, and that means in all facets of their life. So I started thinking, why does it feel like all my life has been nothing but suffering and sacrifice? I don't know if it's God speaking to me or if I'm drawing from somewhere I've read it or what, but I just started sort of hearing this phrase, life is suffering and servitude. Many people may see that as some evil or bad thing, and they, of course, recoil when I state that the default of life is a state of suffering. But it's a fundamental truth to be born a son of man. Life is suffering, but in suffering, you can typically find meaning. That's more difficult nowadays, but I'm finding myself finding some of that now that I have children because they mean so much to me. I think to myself, why do I suffer? Is it just for Christ's sake or for my own purification in spirit? Well, yes, but important to our well-being and our future, that many rapturists think we won't have, is the fact that I do this for them being my children. I've never watched The Simpsons, mostly because my parents never let me growing up, and now it's fallen off according to many people who used to watch it. One image from it has been sort of circulating as a meme in recent years, though, and it instantly personifies why I do what I do for my children. You've got Homer sitting here, says the sign, "Don't forget, you're here forever." And then he has replaced it with a bunch of stickers. It crosses some of the letters out, so it says, "Do it for her." I've embraced this role like Homer as the sacrificial lamb being led to slaughter because it is my duty and it is just. I'm devoting my life to the cause, that cause being a brighter future. Although I won't be the one to usher in this new age, and it's hardly likely that I even get a glimpse of it, but these seeds that I'm sowing now will bring forth tenfold. I'm slowly learning that I will be the sacrifice. I'm no Christ, but I must aim to be Christ-like in my sacrifice. This is not meaningless sacrifice, but meaningful sacrifice. It's a sacrifice that will yield something incredible for my children and their descendants. I truly believe in them and what they're capable of, and I tell them often. My favorite phrase to use with my son is, "You are capable, son," and I mean this sincerely. In an age of belief, where for the majority there's some narcissistic need to believe in oneself and one's own abilities, I have the utmost belief in my children and none in myself. I never had all of the opportunities that will be afforded my children, and I can't be resentful of that, but I must be glad in it. This is what I mean by becoming a sacrifice. I will never be famous or anything that all these modern influencers are attempting to be or become, and I'm fine with that. I won't ever reach the high points on the mountain or be privileged with the things my children are, and I'm okay with that. These are sacrifices that I made for the cause that I believe in. It's an incredibly arduous journey filled with pride and many other evils attempting to ensnare you, but I'm learning to be content in this place. This is why I've accepted my role as a sacrifice, and now I will embrace it with open arms. Because I don't want to just be a sacrifice that's plain and devoid of any meaning, so instead, I would rather become a good sacrifice. If I'm going to be the sacrifice anyway, like Isaac before Abraham, I may as well become a good one. Not one that's wasteful and boring and spiteful, but a joyful sacrifice. It's not a fun purpose, but it's much better than the alternative of being sad and dejected all the time. I know I'm not ever going to be successful by any worldly metric, so it's much better for me to just give up on that and find my joy somewhere else. It's a huge disappointment to me being someone who has always taken joy in personal accomplishments as my predecessors instilled in me, but now I feel a greater purpose and reason for being. Don't take this as me glorifying my children or anything either. All I'm saying is that I realize that I'm not making anything of myself anytime soon, and so I'm taking joy in this season, even though I probably shouldn't. The whole point of this is that for most of you like me, you're going to also be faced with this dilemma. You're not going to be some famous person or rich, so you must not only endure the suffering, but take joy in it so that your children might not have to. There are bad sacrifices, much like many of our ancestors who may have died for pointless causes or tarnished their own legacy, and so can you if you're not careful. So be careful what kind of sacrifice you are, and preferably, become a good one. I found more and more that speaking for myself here, I found more and more that I don't hold anything against the people who don't have children, but how would I put this? If you don't have children, you don't live in the same world as the people who do. And so what you consider to be acceptable courses of action will likely be completely unacceptable to someone who has children. Because once you have children, it completely changes the way that you see the future and the world around you. And that desire to just burn shit down, just get angry and start a revolution, parents don't do that. I don't want to bequeath to my son a world torn apart by war and uprisings and revolutions. I don't want him to grow up in that world. So I'm not going to contribute to that. And anyone who does want to contribute to that world, I don't trust you. I might be able to see you as an ally, but I'm never going to be able to see you as a friend. The vengeful son observation that Jason made is just an all-timer. Don't give in to it. And here's Andrew's response. He says, very well written. I felt spoken for. We should not want the boomers' success because their success was gained by sacrificing their children. Our strength is shown by restraining ourselves from that temptation and sacrificing ourselves instead, as God intended for parents to do. All right. Where we're at here, hour and 45. Let's keep it hopping. Let me see what you guys are saying here in the chat real quick, and then we'll go on to this Mark Andreessen interview. Befriend a boomer. Wit says, my wife and my goal is to have one rental to give to each of our kids. They can live there for free until they've saved up a down payment, and then they can keep it to rent it out or sell it. Creating generational wealth. Bryce says, you don't have something to fight for if you don't have kids, he's saying. All of my friends are having kids, and they say their lives are changed. Me and my wife are expecting our son in May, and it's changing me already. Yes. All right. So this interview with Andreessen was very interesting. I like Peter Robinson a lot. He's like an old classic conservative, but he hasn't lost his mind. He's very relatable. He's like a true statesman, scholar. He has that this I don't know, this phenotype is going to be lost, I think. And it's going to be sad when it's gone. They're talking here about nuclear.
The first nuclear submarine was commissioned in 1955.
Right.
Which means that the United States of America, which has nuclear-powered vessels of all kinds, has been building and operating small nuclear reactors for 6 and 7 decades.
Yeah, right.
And has the systems down so well that these things can be operated by 19-year-old kids who haven't even gone to finished their high school degree. Yeah. And the technology is owned by the American taxpayers.
Yes.
Why aren't we using this?
Where are they? So, as you know...
And by the way, the military is exempt from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
Right. Right. So
okay.
they just do it. And
so is there not a huge opportunity there?
And as you know, literally what they do is they take 19-year-old kids and they train them on how to be nuclear engineers.
Yes.
And then they send them out on 6-month whatever.
Underwater. Operating, yes.
Operating,
and there has, as far as I'm aware, there's never been a nuclear incident.
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other amazing thing about that, by the way, it was pre-DEI.
Of course.
Like, just imagine how amazing it is, given everything we know today, that you could actually do this without the enormous benefits of DEI. Imagine what you could do with DEI.
Now you're being subversive.
quite possibly.
This one hit kind of close to home for me because I was this close to becoming a nuclear engineer. In my early mid-20s, I tried to enlist in the Navy, and it's a whole story, whole crazy story. I got my recruiter in a whole lot of trouble inadvertently. Because they misled me about how I should fill out the forms with regard to, I had asthma as a child. And so as I'm filling out the form, it asked, do you have asthma? And I said, well, I used to, but I don't anymore. Like I haven't had issues with it basically since I became an adult. And my recruiter says, oh, so don't worry about it then. Don't put it, or no, what did he say? He said to write it there, but said to say that there wasn't an issue anymore. Then when I went to MEPS, I did the ASVAB and I performed very well on the ASVAB. And so I had, my recruiter was just like, oh, the nuclear engineers are going to be calling, the recruiters are going to be calling you. And I remember the enlistment bonus at the time for a nuclear engineer was $108,000. So I'm just like, whew, I'm like dollar signs in my eyes. And so I'm at MEPS and we're doing like you get down to your underwear and you do like the waddle across the floor and stuff. And a couple of MPs walk into the room and they yell my name. And I'm like, yes, me? And they're like, follow us. I'm like, oh, shit. So I go in to the CO and he says, why are you lying on your enlistment forms? And I was like, I don't know what you mean. And so earlier in the day there, they had us fill out the exact same form again. And they spent like an hour putting the absolute fear of God into us. That if we ever to be completely honest about every single thing. So I'd said it wrong. The guy originally, when I filled out the form at the recruitment office, they said don't mention it at all. And then so this guy's putting the fear of God into you. Like if you, especially he used asthma as an example. He's like if you have an asthma attack in boot camp and if you don't die, then you're going to be you're not just going to be kicked out of the military, but you're going to be prosecuted for like falsification of a fraudulent enlistment or whatever. And so I'm sitting there listening, and I'm like, oh wow, okay, so I better not lie. I better make sure I'm honest that I used to have asthma. And the way that my recruiter had explained it to me, I was like, oh okay, this makes sense. So initially they just wanted to know like is this a current issue? That's what he'd said. Well, you're filling out, if it's not a current issue, then don't put it on the form. And now I'm here, and they're like, we want to know if it's ever been an issue. I'm like, okay, well, this makes sense to me. So they just want to make sure. So I just filled it out and said, yeah, I used to have it when I was younger, but I haven't had any issues for 20 years or whatever. And this is what the CO was very upset about. And so what he had me do is he had me sit down and write a statement declaring everything. And I had to like put big X's through all the blank spots on the page with the two MPs standing there over my shoulder, fill the whole thing out. And I heard him while he was sitting there. He picked up the phone and he's like, hey, so whatever, you know. And he says, I think we have a case here of recruiter impropriety. And I'm like, oh shit, man. Oh man. And so they said, nope, you're out, and your recruiter's on her way. It was a woman. Your recruiter's on her way to pick you up. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to ride in the car an hour and a half home with this woman who I just gotten in some shit. I mean, I didn't feel too bad because I'm like, you lied to me, so you got to deal with it. It turned out to not be too bad. So this, when I heard this story, it brought back that whole memory. And then Andreessen's little DEI comment there was very interesting at the end. So this one here this is a longer one. I'm going to speed it up just a wee bit. And this is the point where it's possible, because I'm playing content that is also on YouTube, there's the possibility that the YouTube stream is going to get suspended while I'm playing this. If that happens, just go over to X and it'll still be streaming there, or you could just hang out and wait, and as soon as I'm done with the clip, then it'll come back. I'll try to pause it in a few spots and comment on it to break it up, but can't guarantee it. This is a reality of doing a stream of a stream like this. So this is Mark Andreessen breaking down exactly how DOGE will work, what their thinking is, and what their legal basis is going to be moving forward. This is a long watch, but worth it. It's all laid out. Pay attention or listen a few times to get it all. Shout out to Autism Capital for clipping this for us.
So I would start by saying I'm not a spokesman.
We cannot do 1.5. That was 1.25. We'll try to do 1.25. Andreessen talks fast, so if you guys just can't follow it, then I'll drop it back down. Let me know.
Spokesperson for the DOGE, so I'm not gonna represent.
I just want to know what you think.
I'm just going to give you my views.
Elon Musk and Vivek are both very capable of speaking for themselves.
Let them speak for DOGE. So, so look, number one is, people have taken swings at this in the past. That's certainly true. The factors you described are certainly true. Having said that, there are some differences. And so one is, there's a whole bunch of things to talk about, but one is, there's sort of three, the way to think about it is there's like three threads here. There's headcount, there's spend, and those are related, but different, separate threads. And then there's regulations. And then there's an intertwining of the three of them that has become salient as a result of the recent Supreme Court decisions on executive authority and on the so-called Chevron deference. Right. So there's been a set of Supreme Court decisions recently in which the power of the executive branch to basically have agencies that promulgate their own regulatory regimes and then staff and spend against those regulatory regimes without, basically being expressly authorized by Congress to do that. Like the Supreme Court, basically just made that decision that now is something that can be used to turn these things off. An argument.
I haven't in all the press. I haven't yet noticed that DOGE was paying attention to the end of Chevron deference.
Yes, correct.
That you guys have cottoned on to that and intend to make use of it. That decisions get made by Congress and the President of the United States and not by federal agencies. That's huge. Congratulations. In fact, let's end the show right now.
So to start with, by the way, I give Vivek a lot of credit on this. And so Vivek has talked about this publicly. And there's some excellent legal scholars who are around the DOGE process who are contributing to this. So like an argument, and I think it's a very serious argument. An argument is if there is an agency that is either itself should not exist, which we'll come back to in a second, or there's activities at the agency that should not be happening, or there's regulations that the agency is enforcing, there is I think, very strong argument to be made that it is actually necessary for the executive branch to stop doing those things in order to come into compliance with the Supreme Court rulings.
Oh, excellent.
Right.
Oh, excellent.
Which is the opposite.
Oh, excellent.
Which is the opposite valence of what everybody assumes.
Yes,
which is
yes,
you're making some radical progress.
So that's one of the first important things to take away here is that one of the angles that they're going to be pushing on is that all of these cuts that they want to make are not like some new thing out of whole cloth that they're bringing to the table. It's quite literally, we are legally obligated to make these cuts in order to be compliant with the Supreme Court. the Supreme Court that issued these opinions that we're trying to comply with. And so then if you try to appeal them or blockade them and it goes up to the Supreme Court, well, we're the ones who are trying to comply with the Supreme Court. What do you think the Supreme Court's going to say?
Change. It's like, no, we're doing what we're literally required to do.
You just flip the burden of evidence, or burden of proof.
Burden of proof, exactly. And of course, the Chevron, these Supreme Court decisions have had no effect like that up until now. But that's of course because this last administration has had no desire at all.
Right. They wanted a new Supreme Court.
Yeah, exactly. And so.
Oh, we have a visitor. I do recognize you. You've got a shield. Oh no, what are you? It's Eastwood with a sword. Easy, dude. Easy. You want to show everyone your sword and shield? Here, you got to come up this way so they can see it. You got to come back here so you're in the light. There you go. Move the microphone. Look at that. You got a shield and a sword. Those are awesome.
I got it for pooping in the potty.
You got it for pooping in the potty?
Uh-huh.
Good job, man. You saying good night?
Good night.
I love you, big guy.
Ask Mama if I can prove it, Honey.
Okay, you go ask Mama if you can play with Aunt Donnie. Okay. Make sure you shut the door behind you, please. Thanks, mister. I love you.
We're going to be fighting for a piece of land.
You're going to be fighting for a piece of land? Uh-huh. Okay, well, make sure you fight like a gentleman. Okay. All right. They fight with honor.
What's honor?
I'll tell you about it later. You might be able to ask Mommy to tell you about honor, and then I can tell you more about it later. Okay. All right. Love you, bud.
Have you done honor before?
I have done honor before, yeah. Not always. Sometimes I don't. What?
How do you do it?
I'll tell you about it after I do my show, okay? All right. I love you, big guy.
I'm going to be asleep when you're done.
Okay, and I can talk to you about it tomorrow.
Okay.
All right. I love you, dude. Bye. Good night.
I forgot to
But this administration.
You forgot to give me my bedtime kiss?
I forgot to give you your bedtime lovies.
Oh, bedtime lovies. Thank you, man. I like your bedtime lovies.
Yeah. I like Mama's bedtime lovies too.
Yeah, I bet you like Mama's bedtime lovies.
Bedtime lovies all night.
You do bedtime lovies all night. That's right. All right, I love you, big guy.
Daddy, can you give me a kiss that I can give Mama?
Yes, I'll give you a kiss you can give Mama. Go give it to her.
I'll give it on my own and give it to her.
Okay. Thank you, bud.
Welcome. This shield's actually pretty heavy.
It is a heavy shield? Yeah.
Do you want to do a little with my sword?
Oh, yeah, that's a cool sword. Okay. Now I need you to go out, okay?
Okay.
I love you, big guy. Very, very sweet boy. I don't get a lot of the sweetness from him all that often, so I gotta milk it when I get it. All right, let's get back to this. Come on, back.
Has the Supreme Court decisions have had no effect like that up until now, but that's of course because this last administration has had no desire at all.
Right. They wanted a new Supreme Court.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but this administration has the opportunity to do this differently. Pop quiz, Peter. How many federal agencies are there?
Too many?
Yes.
127 is some figure I read
No,
somewhere.
it's at least, it's like in the range of like 450 to 500.
Are you serious?
There is a claim going around.
There are now 15 cabinet departments. I looked that up after seeing this.
Well, we have this new innovation. I don't know when it came out in the last decades. So the concept of an independent agency.
Oh, yes.
And like, I've read the Constitution.
Independent of everything, including the Constitution of the United States. It's outrageous.
I've read the Constitution, and there is no provision in there for an independent agency. By the way, there are executive branch agencies that have their own internal courts.
Yes.
They have their own judges. I've read the Constitution. That's nowhere in there.
Correct.
Right. And so there's a rumor going around. I don't know if it's true. There's a rumor going around that nobody actually knows the number of federal agencies. That there's no actual individual person who actually knows the answer. One is because there's just so many of them, and there's new ones created every year. But the other is we have all these fuzzy things now. The CFPB is like the canonical example right now. We have these sort
CFPB is the Consumer
Finance Protection Board,
established by Senator Elizabeth Warren.
It's sort of considered Warren's agency. Yeah, exactly. And it is nominal. I don't know the exact legal terminology, but it's nominally an independent agency under the supervision of the Federal Reserve.
Right. She wrote the legislation specifically so that no president of the United States could fire the director of the whatever it's called, CFPB. which is unconstitutional on the face of it.
On the face of it, unambiguously. It's still a unit of that. I don't know if that happened. I don't know the exact state of that, but it's a unit of the Federal Reserve. The constitutionality of the Federal Reserve has always been a very interesting question.
Correct.
The ability for the president.
You're good. I'm really okay.
These are interesting. And I'm not saying these are easy answers, but these are important questions.
One of the great things about this whole conversation was how excited Peter Robinson started getting. He was getting, like, you could see him here. He's like jumping out of his seat. It's funny listening to Andreessen, because when I listened to this interview, I listened to it on 2x. But it's funny sitting here now, it's on 1 1/4, and even I'm kind of like trying to have to like focus a little bit to try to follow him. I don't know why that is.
Right.
Just asking the questions gets you a long way.
Yes, exactly. And so you have all of the, and you know this, like you have all, these are the same issues that come up when people talk about like special prosecutors and all these things, which is just like, all right, it's, it may be a good idea in theory, it's literally not in the Constitution. What are we doing? Right. The Constitution is very clear. The president's the chief executive, the chief law officer of the United States. There is no provision in there. So anyway, so there are all of these agencies and components of the government that have just sprawled out. Basically, a friend of mine, Curtis Yarvin, has this great line that says, we are living under the...
A friend of mine, Curtis Yarvin. See?
A friend of mine, Curtis Yarvin, has this great line. He says, "We are living under the 80-year evolution of FDR's personal monarchy, but without FDR, right?" And so, because FDR, of course, is the guy, with the New Deal, and so he turned the federal government from this, basically this small overlay thing into this giant sprawling bureaucracy, and then it basically has continued to expand and morph and mutate under its own power. And anyway, so we do seem to have a Supreme Court that wants to, kind of pull this back in. So yes, there's an opportunity to do this. The DOGE team has, I think, very clever ideas on all three of the threats that I described: on spend, on headcount, and on regulation. I'll just give you one example. Sure. Headcount. So the federal government. Well, here's another pop quiz. This is how many people work for the federal government.
How many people work for the federal government? So as I recall, the Pentagon is a uniformed force of about 2 million.
The numbers that he pulls out here are just like the sheer number of federal employees is mind-boggling. I never would have guessed it was anywhere close to the numbers that they start talking about.
And another 1.5 million civilians, and then the federal government, actually the head count hasn't expanded that much for 20 or 30 years, as I recall. It's about 2.5 or 3 million in Washington, D.C., civilian bureaucrats. Is that right?
How many contractors?
Oh, no. Okay. Unknown. Unknowable.
Unknowable. There are estimates that are very high. I won't wing numbers off at the fly, but there are estimates that the numbers are much higher.
Right.
So
we're talking like 6 or 7 million federal government employees before you even get to contractors. And contractors is probably at least twice that, I'd imagine, at least. But yeah, the Yarvin reference there is very interesting because you've got, so Andreessen's kind of downplaying his role. He's like, I don't speak officially for the DOGE. I'm an unpaid intern, whatever. But he's fucking Mark Andreessen. Like, of course, he's actively involved. He's spending like 50% of his time at Mar-a-Lago. He's very closely involved in this. And part of the significance of this to me, I think, is that people like Mark Andreessen, who wield as much capital and power and influence as Mark Andreessen does, that run in all these circles, who speak for as many people as Mark Andreessen does, this is the way that they're approaching the DOGE. This isn't some sort of like, you just gotta kind of try to do something or whatever and just throw some bones to the base or something like that. No, this is their thing. This is the thing that they want. They're influenced by Yarvin's analysis of the state of the government, the Burnham's approach to, or Burnham's analysis of managerialism. They see it as a cancer and they want it gone. Think of them what you will, whether you like them or don't like them. What I'm saying is that this DOGE thing is happening.
So anyway, so then just sort of fun fact, which is like, what's the occupancy rate of federal buildings in Washington, D.C. right now by people working in the office?
Something like 25%, isn't it?
It's like 25% on average.
Lower than San Francisco.
Yes, it's basically that Washington, D.C. federal building complex is basically a ghost town. The security agencies are still full-time. The other agencies are not. In the extreme cases, you have certain agencies that are all the way down to a day a month. And this is true, there were collective bargaining, in some of the agencies, this is the other thing, is that some of the agencies, the employees are unionized at the federal level. And there were collective bargaining agreements struck in some of these agencies where they literally, during COVID, got the right to never come back to work. And in one of the ones that I'm aware of, in the agency I know well, they literally come back to work a day a month. And so what the employees do is they come back a day a month, but they pair the days. And so they come back for 2 days every 2 months.
Wow.
And so, and it's just like, and you ask any CEO in corporate America, like, how is this whole thing going? What are your employees doing? When they're in, every CEO will tell you, like, are these people, like, what on earth is happening? Are these people working? And so does the President of the United States have the legal authority to order people back to work? Does it count to be an employee of the federal government if you're not in the office?
Okay,
so there's
all of this is just beautiful.
Their a ton of threats like that they're going to find.
All this is beautiful, really, truly beautiful. However, DOGE is an advisory commission. True. I believe this is the way the president.
Just want to comment on this. The fact that you could have unionized employees of the federal government. It's clown world. The idea that you could have employees who unionize to collectively bargain for the compensation that they receive from the taxpayers is just clown world.
Has set it up as an advisory commission. It has its sunset date. Yes. It ends on it goes out of business on July 4th, 2026. That's right. I'm very happy. I like sunsetting anything to do with the federal government. Yeah. But where do you and Elon and Vivek get the authority to make anybody do anything, including Congress to pass enabling legislation, including the president to write executive orders, or, given what little background I have in Washington, what I immediately, before you can get John Thune, the majority leader in the Senate, to introduce legislation, he'll have political people looking at all the political ramifications, and there's going to be some senators say, oh, I don't know, that you stepped on the toes of my constituent here. And the politics is going to start at you guys.
Right, right. So I'll give you one more.
How do you get stuff actually done?
Can I give you one more first? And I'll answer the question. So I forget the exact term, but there's a legal term. So the Constitution authorizes, it says Congress authorizes money for the executive branch to spend. There's I forget what rescission, is it called rescission? There's a legal term that basically means that the executive branch is also not allowed to spend less than Congress appropriates.
True. Which is what I have a recommendation, which is that you look at the 1974 legislation that removed from Richard Nixon, or it removed because of Richard Nixon, the ability of the president, which at that point had been traditionally accepted, to impound funds.
That's right, impoundment.
We want more impoundment. We want to get back to impoundment, correct?
Right, impoundment, yes, impoundment. I forget which way.
If you guys have been listening to the Astrolabe, you knew that impoundment was going to come up. It's going to be a thing with the DOGE. And then note, he mentions a couple of cabinet level officials here who are important, and note which ones. Those of you who've listened to the Astrolabe, you might know, you might be able to predict it in advance, but he mentions them.
It goes, but impoundment is the concept that the president legally is required to spend the money that's appropriated. The president is not allowed to save money. Right. The president is not allowed to spend less money than Congress has appropriated. Once again, if you read the Constitution, it doesn't say that. Right. This has been an issue of significant constitutional debate over the last 40 years, literally since that happened. And there have been, Wikipedia's, there's lots of arguments back and forth on this. Right. I don't know if this is the kind of thing that the Supreme Court would look at. might be a good idea, right? So,
but the president of the United States, I mean, you don't have to be a genius in political science to construct the argument, which is that there's only one man or woman, one person who faces the entire country in an election, and therefore can be said to represent a national, as opposed to all these little parochial interests, a national interest in an overall ceiling on the federal budget, and that is the president of the United States. Correct?
Yeah. So that's the answer.
Okay.
So that's the answer. And the answer, and by the way, to be clear, I'm not DOGE. I'm an unpaid intern.
Yes. But we're having fun, Mark. Let's the details.
Vivek and Elon are running it, and then it itself is not getting set up as a permanent agency. Right. It doesn't have the authority to execute on everything we're talking about. Okay. But the White House does, the executive branch does, and the president does, and so it will be as it should be. It will be a decision of the president on what he wants to do with these recommendations. The people being staffed into the positions, so that the new head of OMB is very, has talked publicly about being very aligned with this. The new head of OPM is actually
OMB, OPM.
With these recommendations, the people being staffed into the positions, so that the new head of OMB is very, has talked publicly about being very aligned with this. The new head of OPM is actually a partner of ours is going in there. He's very aligned with this, and so the executive branch will have the execution capability to be able to do this, but it's at the president's deference, and we'll see what happens.
But from what you have seen on your many visits to Mar-a-Lago, this has the personal interest and support of the president-elect of the United States.
Yeah, he said so repeatedly. He was asked the other day, and he always gets asked, do you still support Elon? And he's at least so far 100% of the time, he's fully supportive, and so he's greenlit this. I mean, look, Elon has been living at Mar-a-Lago, right? So they're doing this, and so look, I've full deference to the president. He'll do what he wants. This is there. Let me give you one more thing on this, though, and this goes to what's happening more broadly in the environment, and this is one of the reasons why you have all this panic now about the decensorship of the internet. Is that you'll recall? So I'm sure the Grace Commission tried to explain to the public what was happening with federal spending. I know Al Gore tried to. He went on Letterman and tried to articulate it. Ross Perot at one point was trying to do it with the flip charts and all these things. But we had a Senator Proxmire out of Wisconsin for a long time.
Of course.
Had the Golden Fleece Award. He would come out every year with the crazy spending things. But it was always like when Proxmire used to do it. It was always it's just 2 minutes once a year on NBC News. Of course, what does Elon have and what does Vivek have and what do the rest of us have now is we now have the ability to actually ventilate this information in public, right? We have the ability to actually show and demonstrate this and actually expose this to the public view on both sides. Number one, here's all the stupid stuff. Here's all the stuff that clearly is just you're being taken for a ride on, right? And then the other side is, by the way, with corresponding cuts, here's the money that's being saved that's going back, into the taxpayer pocket. And so there's a PR is the old. It's beyond PR. It's not PR anymore because PR kind of implies you're going through the press. Those days are over. This is going to be direct interaction with the public.
Mark, we've just been through a decade now in which we were told again and again and again that Donald John Trump represents a danger to democracy.
Yes.
You are describing a renewal
Renewal
of democracy.
Yes, 100%. Clearly.
All right.
100%.
Okay, I just wanted to check.
Yes. Yes, and so this will be the key. This will, I mean, just as an observer, I say this will ultimately be the key. The key ultimately is going to be the direct relationship of the president with the people. Like, that is ultimately going to be the key. And if the people are on board with the president, you know, this, if the people are on board with the president has tremendous power. That gives the president the ability to get a lot of what he wants done through Congress. If the president doesn't have the support of the people, Congress can roll him arbitrarily. And so, as you know, Reagan knew this. By the way, FDR knew this. Like all the good presidents knew this. Trump 100% knows this, and you know he does this every day, and he's going to.
If you can bring the country with you, you can go anywhere.
Yeah, that's right.
If you can bring the country with you, you can go anywhere. Now, note this observation they're making here, that it's a very Yarvinian point that Mark is making, that if the Trump, like the Putin in Russia, if Trump has the backing of the people, the support of the people, then he can do these kinds of things. So if your concern is that Congress is going to roll him arbitrarily, as he said, then would not the proper way to react to that, to prevent that from happening, be to very loudly and vocally support the president? Ensure that it's unambiguously clear that the president has the support of the American people in undertaking these sorts of actions. This is what, like, it's so plainly clear. All the you have like the DOGE skeptics and the Trump's just going to get rolled by Congress people who are somehow incapable of observing this plain reality. If you want Trump to successfully do these things, if you're skeptical that they could happen, you want them to happen, but you don't think that they could. There's politics and whatever, Congress, and this guy has his little carve out that he wants, and the AIPAC and the Jews and whatever. Then it would behoove you, if you could connect two brain cells in your head, it would behoove you to recognize that the sword that cuts through this Gordian knot is enthusiastic, unambiguous support of the president. Loud, vocal, performative. Make it incredibly clear. Trump has the full backing of the American people. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to actually fully back him on everything. But it's pragmatic. Ensure that it's very clear that Trump has the full backing of the American people so that Congress doesn't dare get in the way. All right, now this one's going to be a lead-in. This is a third and final clip from that interview. This is going to be a lead-in to the Yarvin Substack that I'm going to read. It's a long one. You guys bear with me. Trey here says, President proxying the people directly like a public interface. That's almost a reversion of what president as an institution has become. It's like a new king, really. Yes. So this is talking about technology change and productivity. Now, obviously, this is motivated reasoning for Andreessen, being a guy who's made his nut in tech and spent his entire life in tech and cares very much about tech. But we're going to have to, between this one here and then the Yarvin piece, we're going to have to, yeah, it's a Yarvin article. Of course it's long. We're going to have to do a little exercising of our ability to hold two ideas at the same time. So first, this.
So you probably know this. Economists, there is actually a way to measure the pace of technology change in the economy. There's a way to measure it and put a number on it, and with related to everything, both the positives and negatives of technology change, including job replacement. And it's
is this Paul Romer's
productivity growth.
Okay.
Paul did a lot of work around this, but the basic economic concept is productivity growth.
All right.
And productivity growth is a measure. It's the quantitative measure of technology change. There's a few other things that lump in, but fundamentally it's about technology change. And really, what it is it's a metric for how quickly an economy year over year is able to produce more output with less input, right? And you can go either way on that, but fundamentally that's the lever. And if technology can't, just the thought experiment, if technology can't be used to produce more output with less input, like what's the point, right? If it's not good at like bringing down jobs, or bringing down costs and increasing free spending power and increasing demand in the economy, then what's the point, right? It's just a game or something, right? And so productivity growth is the metric that captures the actual impact, and productivity growth therefore is the metric that captures, for example, the downstream impact on employment, either for good or for bad.
Right.
Another pop quiz: have we been if you look at the sweep of American history and sort of history of capitalism, history of Western capitalism, have in the last 50 years we've been living in an era of high productivity growth, which is to say an area of furious technological change and future shock and, oh my God, look at all these amazing things and what an impact they're having, or have we been living in an area actually of historically low productivity growth with very little progress?
Our friend Peter Thiel has persuaded me that it's the latter.
It's the latter. Well, it's for
It
sure
is the latter.
It's for sure the latter because it's in the number. You can see it in the numbers.
It's demonstrable.
It's demonstrable. And so, and specifically what happened is basically between there's a long backstory here, but basically in recent history, between call it 1920 and 1970, that 50-year arc, productivity growth throughout the economy moved much faster, was 2 or 3 times higher. And then basically starting around the time I was born, right around 1971, basically it took a permanent downshift and it never recovered. And it wobbles a little bit during recessions. It ticks up a little bit because people get more efficient, but it's basically been generationally low now for 2 generations. And so
the whole game. Yeah. Excuse me. This comes to a question I was about to ask. When Ronald Reagan, again of that morning again in America, when Ronald Reagan took office, federal debt, the total federal debt as a proportion of GDP was about 32%. Right. Today, 126%. Right. The whole game is going to be getting productivity growth up, correct?
Well, you have to. Well, so you have to exactly. So you have to get productivity growth up because that's where economic growth comes from. Productivity growth is what causes economic growth.
Right.
The reason productivity growth causes economic growth is because if you can generate more with less, then you can take things today that cost $100 and then you can get them instead for $90, $80, $70, $60, and then the consumer or the business has additional spending power that they can use to buy new things. That is the mechanism of economic growth. Like that is the actual mechanism for why economies grow or whether they don't grow. If productivity growth goes to zero, there is no growth. There is no economic growth. If productivity growth is high, you will have lots of job transformations. You will have lots of jobs being created and destroyed, but you will have a growing economy, and you will have basically an economic heyday in which there's opportunity everywhere, and people will look at it. And you see, there have been times like this. The mid '90s had a little bit of this. The mid '80s, you remember, like when there's a surge of economic growth, everybody like gets really cheerful. Well, that's as a consequence of productivity growth.
That morning again in America, what happened was that by 1983 the stock market started to recover, and by '84 the economy itself is starting to grow and grow really briskly. I think 84, 85 the number was up to 6% for something like 8 months.
Right. So if you
care about people felt it.
That's right. And so if you care about the country and if you care about the people of the country, what you want is growth. You want economic growth. In order to get economic growth, you need productivity growth. Things are going to change, but you're going to have the growth such that people are optimistic and see lots of opportunity for themselves and for their children. The enemy is not technology-driven unemployment. The enemy is no growth. The enemy is no growth. The enemy is to end up where the UK and Germany and Canada have worked themselves into, which is no growth. Because what happens, and then you think about the translation from economics to politics, what happens in
start ripping themselves apart, ripping their countries apart.
Zero-sum politics.
Yes,
if you have zero-sum economics with no growth, you have to have zero-sum politics because the only way for anybody to get anything is to take it away from somebody else. In a high-growth environment, you have positive-sum economics, which means you have positive-sum politics. You have a sense of possibility and opportunity, right, and awakening and growth and excitement, right? And people are like, wow, this is fantastic, and I can't believe all the opportunities, and I can't believe how fast my standard of living is advancing, and I can't believe the jobs are opening up to my kids. And so if we got, this is where the narrative on this goes so sideways, if we got what people think is the apocalyptic nightmare of rapid technological change, which is to say rapid productivity growth, we would have a boom economy like you've never seen, and we would have people be the happiest they've ever been in their entire lives. Like that is precisely what we should be going for. And by the way, anybody who's listening to this who's concerned about either left-wing populism or right-wing populism, this is the answer. Right. This is how you defang populism. The way you defang populism is you grow.
Okay, so
all of this being said, on one hand, so just pin that thought up there for a minute. Actually, a few minutes. It's going to take a few minutes to get through this Yarvin piece. But before I get to that Yarvin piece, someone sent me this just before went live. I think it was actually CG Constantine who just turned in for the night. But this here's Larry Fink on a related subject, saying something you probably would not expect to hear from Larry Fink.
You know, we always used to think shrinking population is a cause for negative growth. But in my conversations with the leadership of these large developed countries that have xenophobic immigration policies, they don't allow anybody to come in, shrinking shrinking demographics, these countries will rapidly develop robotics and AI and technology. And if the promise, I didn't say it's going to happen, but if the promise of all that transforms productivity, which most of us think it will, we'll be able to elevate the standard of living of countries and the standard of living of individuals, even with shrinking populations. And so the paradigm of negative population growth is going to be changing. And the social problems that one will have in substituting humans for machines is going to be far easier in those countries that have declining populations.
Just to emphasize it one more time, this one right here.
But in my conversations with the leadership of these large developed countries that have xenophobic immigration policies, they don't allow anybody to come in, shrinking shrinking demographics, these countries will rapidly develop robotics and AI and technology. And if the promise, I didn't say it's going to happen, but if the promise of all that transforms productivity, which most of us think it will, we'll be able to elevate the standard of living of countries and the standard of living of individuals.
So he's tying a line between large developed countries with xenophobic immigration policies to the development of AI and robotics and automation and all such things, and elevating the standard of living for the people in those countries with those xenophobic immigration policies. Mr. DEI and ESG is suddenly now championing the potential benefits of xenophobic immigration policies. Now, I don't see this as based Larry Fink. I think Larry Fink is a suit. Larry Fink is a corporeal vessel for other people's agendas. This is like that Chinese woman I showed you the thing of earlier, that she's a DNC fundraiser, now she's Republican. These are the weather vanes. They're pointing to you which direction things are going. It's actually a little sinister to me to hear Larry Fink talking about declining populations, because that's like the other side of this. There's the like xenophobic immigration policies, and then there's the declining populations. You don't necessarily, these are not like one-to-one. You can have these xenophobic immigration policies, and you can have expanding populations. That's the ideal. But what this does signal to me, it's a small thing, it's one small thing, and it could be him sounding off on something and he gets slapped or whatever. But this does signal to me him. So Larry Fink is a small fry in the bigwig world. He's a front man for a company that manages a large amount of capital, but actually controls a small amount of capital, relatively speaking. And Larry Fink is the perfect example of a human being replaced by a robot. Yeah. He's gotten his updates. Xenophobic immigration policies are on the menu. So now we need to talk about the benefits to these xenophobic immigration policies, because we just got to deal with the world that we live in and not the world that we want to live in. Okay. Migration and the sovereign firm. I really wish that the background was black here, but I think this is a Substack. It's like each person on their own Substack, they can determine what the view of it is, and I don't have any way of turning on dark mode or something on here, so we just have to deal with the bright white screen. Migration and the Sovereign Firm, written December 28, 2024, in Gray Mirror, Gray with an A, the American way, graymirror.substack.com. This is Curtis Yarvin. Flushed with pride from an election win, alas, probably still just another cheap hit of publicity crack, huge in the moment and historically ephemeral, but who knows, eh? The two halves of the so-called new right, rationalists and traditionalists, have started our new era off in fine American style by squabbling in public over Indian visas. Cool. For me, this spat just illustrates the inadequacy of the standard liberal framework of political science that history has condemned both sides to live in. Liberalism, as we know it, is only about 250 years old, a shorter lifespan than some Chinese dynasties. And only for about the last 50 years has it so completely excluded pre-modern thinking, the shared heritage of the European and antique worlds combined, that even most of us conservative intellectuals have forgotten how to think about political science rigorously within a pre-liberal framework. Now, if you've read Yarvin long enough and you get Yarvin, you understand what he's doing here. He's, first of all, this the election win, probably just another cheap hit of publicity crack. He's always saying nothing's ever happening, but he's doing this performatively. Nothing's happening. No, yeah. You know, if Elon was serious, these are all the things Elon would be doing. And obviously, since he's not doing any of those things, he's not serious. You know, it's a character. And then calling himself a conservative intellectual. All of us conservative intellectuals. This is one of his things where, like when he wrote the, why can't I remember anything today? Open letter to open-minded progressives. He was like, "Hello, fellow progressives. We can still think intuitively, like peasants, about the meaning of the nation state. There is much to be said for coarse peasant wisdom. Shout out to the chuds. But when we think analytically, like lawyers or professors, we have no choice but to think as liberals. Conservative, quote unquote, politics comes from Locke and at best Cicero. Conservative economics is from Smith and at best Mises. Great thinkers, but in a narrow tradition. In this essay, we'll develop an analytical post-liberal framework that will let us think as concretely in an illiberal framework as liberals do in their liberal framework about questions like open borders and free trade. The migration question. Very smart conservatives of today, when they think about immigration in specific, have no choice but to surrender to either of these modes. If you're against the free movement of labor, the only mode in which you can express yourself is intuitive or even downright romantic. The more you do this, the more you sound like Mussolini. This doesn't mean you're wrong, but it doesn't bode well either. However, when you surrender to your analytical side, you can feel yourself turning into the world's worst kind of spurg. You know you are wrong. But all the known formulas say you're right. What do? In the end, the choice always comes down to what kind of person you are. While Trump is a purely intuitive person, a genuine intuitive genius, Musk is something even more rare, an intuitive genius and an analytical genius. The trouble is that sometimes both of these geniuses collide, and the latter always takes precedence. This would be fine if he was using the right analytical formula. Unfortunately, Musk's libertarian framework is the political science equivalent of Newtonian mechanics, an oversimplification which only works in special cases. And even more unfortunately, our own time and place does not seem to be within one of these Newtonian envelopes. Intuition can compensate only so much for bad analysis. Within Musk's framework, skilled immigration, or whatever euphemism stands behind this term, feels like an easy win. Math always beats intuition. But what if the formula is missing a term? Analytically, it feels like the effect of skilled immigration, abstractly, on productivity is not measurable but is quantifiable, whereas the negative impact, if any, on society is neither measurable nor quantifiable. It's hard to pick unquantifiable over quantifiable. What is society anyway? What process of scientific government could support this? Once you get to choosing anything intangible over efficiency, efficiency goes out the window. So he's saying you have your intuitive frame and then you have your analytic frame. And he says we have the intuitive frame and the analytic frame together. You're always going to get the latter. When these geniuses collide, you get the latter. So Musk is an intuitive genius and an analytic genius. What do you say here? Yeah, an intuitive genius and an analytical genius. But it would be fine that the analytic genius takes over the intuitive genius with someone like Musk if he was using the right analytical formula. Unfortunately, he's not. He's operating from this libertarian framework. So if you're dealing with this bad analytic framework that just is going to look at numbers above all, then skilled immigration is like, look at the numbers, number go up. So analytically, it feels like the effect of skilled immigration on productivity. You can't necessarily measure it, but you can quantify it. You can figure out ways of putting numbers on it to evaluate it. But then the downside on society, you can't measure it or quantify it. And so if you can't quantify it, then how are you going to consciously choose a set of policies to prioritize this unquantifiable thing over the quantifiable thing? Because if you're choosing the intangible thing over efficiency, most likely you're giving up efficiency. This is a fundamental flaw in the materialist liberal frame. Sovereign accounting and labor migration. The traditionalists understand an extremely important analytical principle, but they have no analytical model for this principle, so they can only express it intuitively. In fact, the negative impact of free movement in labor, while hard to measure, is easy to quantify. The same is true of its close relative, free movement in goods. But Elon's classical accounting formula is missing the term that would quantify these impacts. Let's try to correct it by adding back the relativity term. It is correct to define the government as a company. The nation is a sovereign firm. Or, if we prefer, the firm is a sort of second-order virtual nation state. The two concepts are clearly different in a clear way, yet clearly related in a clear way. Can we generalize across them? Of course, but we have to do it right. So, the government is a company, the nation is a sovereign firm. Or you could say the firm is a sort of second-order virtual nation state. It is tempting to conclude that the economic purpose of a firm is to create valuable goods and services, whereas the economic purpose of a government is to maximize GDP, the total sum of goods and services created by the nation. This is what I call Newtonian accounting. It is actually wrong for both firms and governments. This accounting is wrong for firms because maximizing productive output is not the goal of a firm. Maximizing the value of its capital is the goal of a firm. While these goals are directionally similar and often aligned, they can easily diverge. Capital is traditionally measured by an efficient equity market. The goal of a CEO is to make the investors happy by making the stock go up. The market's estimate of the company's capitalization corresponds to its estimate of its future profit until infinity, discounted by the interest rate. Because double entry accounting, this must equal the total value of its tangible assets, factories, etc., and intangible assets, brand value, etc. While profit generally corresponds to revenue, they are not the same thing. So, like, revenue is total receipts. Profit is whatever's left after paying off all the costs. So profit is going to be a subset of revenue. You could sell a lot of dollars for 99 cents. Moreover, estimating the value of capital involves a little thing called depreciation. Factories, houses, and other forms of capital wear out when you use them. Some forms of capital can even experience appreciation. They get more valuable. Land can appreciate. All of this has to go in the quarterly report. If you ignore the appreciation and depreciation of your capital, you're driving a rented car. No one ever changed the oil in a rented car. Maximizing GDP as a national accounting policy means we are maximizing the total utility delivered by the productive sector to the consumptive sector. All systems of modern economic policy, from socialism to capitalism, are agreed on this goal. So maximize the total utility delivered by the productive sector to the consumptive sector. Socialists want to use the visible hand to shift production from luxuries for the rich to necessities for the poor. This means they measure utility in a different way, a way not captured by summing up dollars. 1,000 bushels of wheat sent to Ghana produces more user utility than one Patek Philippe sent to London. Okay, sure. In case you didn't know, Africa imports 85% of its food. Capitalists point out that the damage done by the visible hand often exceeds its utility even by the socialist definition. Okay, sure. But notice what they both agree on: maximizing utility. Isn't the goal of the productive sector to produce utility? What else could we optimize for? What other kind of formula could we optimize for? Well, we could optimize for the same goal as a private firm, maximizing the value of our capital. This would involve thinking about appreciation, depreciation of capital. But what exactly are the capital assets of the state? Human capital in the sovereign firm. Here's where Elon Musk and I disagree. Almost everyone today agrees with Elon. Even the traditionalists, almost all of them, agree with Elon, which is why they have so much trouble expressing their point analytically. Intuitively, they get it perfectly. Essentially, everyone today is a liberal. Libertarians are liberals, conservatives are liberals, and liberals are liberals. They are all using the wrong analytical framework. Historically, however, almost everyone agrees with me. The Newtonian or liberal view is in fact an English view from the 17th century. Unfortunately, just because it took over the world doesn't make it true. The liberal modern view is that the state exists to serve its citizens. The state, in its supervision of commerce, aims to maximize the utility produced by the economy. The purpose of government is to protect a free people in their pursuit of happiness. The illiberal pre-modern view is that the state owns its subjects. There are no citizens. There are only subjects. To put it as pejoratively as we possibly can, state slaves. The purpose of government is to render those slaves as productive as possible, which, because double entry accounting, means making them as valuable as possible. To a modern liberal, libertarian, or conservative, this is the most offensive possible declaration of authoritarianism or even totalitarianism. To Plato, it's Tuesday. Musk assumes he understands political science better than Plato just because he understands physics better than Plato. Actually, Plato is right. The nation is the people. The state is the owner of the nation, the land, structures, and people, which are its sovereign property. Ownership means exclusive dominion. This is the relationship between the state and the subject. Some arms of the state may sometimes protect the subject from other arms of the state. But every state, considered as a whole, can do whatever it wants to any of its subjects. And inasmuch as it cannot, it is not a state at all. Since a state is an organization which owns territory and people, the only difference between a state and a plantation is A, size, and B, independence. On a plantation within a state, the relationship between master and slave can at least be checked by the state. Between sovereign state and individual, the individual has no defense at all. This is the very definition of sovereignty. Anyone who does not believe in sovereign property is fundamentally an anarchist. That he still believes in personal and corporate private property is only a slight mitigation of his destructive and incorrigible leftism, which does to states what socialism does to companies. Fortunately, this anarchism does not prevent the sovereign state from existing, only from analyzing itself clearly and rigorously. If the subjects of a government are treated as assets on its national balance sheet, as human capital, that means it owns them. That means it has to safeguard them. It has to protect and nurture them. And it is responsible for their appreciation or depreciation. Here is a way to quantify the traditional responsibility of the state for the common good, which conservatives, but not libertarians, believe in. A government that does not think of itself as owning its subjects, perhaps some kind of temporary military occupation, can afford to disregard this term in the formula. This is why temporary military occupation can be quite careless of the common good. The general in charge is essentially driving a rented car. To traditionalists, it seems that Musk and his fellow open borders billionaires want to drive America like a rented car. But they need an analytical framework that can express this intuitive truth. What is quantified does not need to be measured. The USG is not necessarily selling its valuable citizen slaves overseas like a European soccer team. It is enough to think about the value of a human being in an abstract sense. But the classical state trades in an exogenous currency, one it cannot create, and its balance of trade is the exact analog of the private company's profit and loss. When we see a trade surplus, we see a profitable company. When we see a trade deficit, we see a money-burning company. The trade surplus is a measure of the productivity of the state's subjects. Again, compare China to America here. And we know what makes human beings more valuable, in almost every sense: work. Ideally, complex, challenging work that tests the limits of some craft, skill, or trade. We sense that a valuable human being, professionally or otherwise, is one who has done the most to develop a lifelong profession at the edge of their human capacity. China has developed not just by building factories, but by building people who know how to build and work in factories. Work and meaning and profit cannot be separated. Humans, like robots, can be productive, but as capital, they obey very different rules. For a machine, production implies depreciation. For a human, production implies appreciation. There are exceptions, health-damaging trades, but they are exceptions. We know what does not make human beings more valuable in almost every sense: consumption. At least consumption once it gets past the level of basic necessity. The GDP mindset makes almost zero sense from the standpoint of nation as firm. In fact, the more luxuries you produce for your citizens, the softer, weaker, and less productive they get. And they do not just suffer economically, but also spiritually. The spiritual benefits of challenging and especially meaningful work are well known. Quite the statement for an atheist Jew. Hunter-gatherers rarely feel like they're working. Everything is meaningful and everything is challenging. Is hunting work? Is fishing work? People sell real estate so they can hunt and fish. Who would hunt and fish so they could sell real estate? When we look at A, the common good, B, appreciation and depreciation of human capital, and C, the net production of utility, we are struck immediately by the fact that A and B are clearly aligned, that is, the common good and the appreciation or depreciation of human capital, whereas C, the net production of utility, the criterion that all modern thinkers agree on, the GDP metric beloved by libertarians and socialists alike, is the misaligned metric. Analytically, America is being driven like a rented car, if not a rented mule. And when we cast our intuitive eyes across the state of the nation, we see that it's being driven like a rented car, if not a rented mule. Suddenly, now our formulas do not deceive us. The old formula was wrong, and the new formula, which is even older, was right. China has been managed on the new formula for 40 years. Whose economy is better? China, for the most part, imports neither people nor goods. They seem to be doing fine without any Tamil Brahmins at all. Just saying. Let's quantify the poisonous effect of importing goods and or labor into an economy. In the new formula, this toxic impact is as clear as day. If the labor demand, elastic, in the economy does not supply quality work to the labor supply, inelastic, we will see clear depreciation in the human capital. We may not be able to measure this effect, e.g. by selling random subjects on some imaginary global slave market, but we can define it in quantitative terms. So in other words, if the demand for labor, which can be adjusted in the economy, is not supplying quality work to the labor supply, which is inelastic, you can't get you can't get more people to do more things if you're operating within the frame of the nation. So you have a limited supply of labor. You have the people who are available at your disposal. And then you have the demand for that labor, which can be moved up and down based on the levels of the interplay between the levels of consumption and level of production. So if there is not enough quality work for the people, then the human capital will depreciate, which is an indicator that the state, which is responsible for maintaining and appreciating the human capital, is failing in their job. Whether they're doing it malevolently or incompetently because they're operating off of the wrong formula here. They're not optimizing for the right thing. They're optimizing for GDP, but they're not optimizing for the actual value of the human capital, which can appreciate or depreciate independent of GDP. Then this becomes obvious when this is happening. So when you're importing goods or labor into an economy, this is the effect that you're having. So by being a net importer of either people or goods, you are depreciating the capital of the people in the economy or in the nation. And you might not be able to measure it. So it's not like there's some sort of global slave market where you could say, hey, they're paying XYZ for an American and XYZ for a Brazilian. And then there's this other price here for an Indian. And you can compare them. Oh, the human capital here is a lot lower. That doesn't exist. But you can define it in quantitative terms. If there are not enough good jobs for all the Americans, some of the Americans will become useless bums. Or they'll have to take shitty bullshit jobs, which will cause them to fall short of their human potential. It will leave them less valuable as human beings, as human capital, as government slaves. See how easy this new math is? If it seems paradoxical that accepting the principle that government slavery is the key to human freedom and flourishing, it seems no less paradoxical that socialism is the way to ruin and impoverish a society. But it always seems to work out that way. Everything rots when it has no owner, human beings included. Once we realize that, in a 21st century economy, the goal of matching labor demand to labor supply is much more significant than the goal of maximizing the supply of comforts and pleasures to the population, either because, according to my super spurgy analysis, we are all government slaves, or because, in terms Hillary Clinton would be quite happy with, purpose, skill, and meaning are more important to human existence than pixel count on your flat screen TV, we get to turn liberal economics upside down and make it make sense again. For instance, if we have a lot of professional programmers who can't find jobs as such, but have to be Walmart greeters, we are racking up fat losses on these human assets. From a depreciation standpoint, it would be economically ideal to give them fake jobs. But ideally, they would not even know the jobs were fake. Instead, we are pumping all the appreciation energy into these H-1Bs, who are human assets of another government, while our own human capital rots on the couch. The difference between migrant labor and free trade is clearly a difference of degree. In both cases, we are using foreign labor to fulfill domestic labor demand. So if you're free trade where you're importing goods from another country, you're just getting foreign labor by proxy to fulfill domestic labor demand. It's like the step before just importing the person themselves. Therefore, the appreciation is being foregone. And human assets depreciate if they are not used. They appreciate when used to the limit of potential. Again, we are driving America like a rented car. It is efficient to change the oil in a car you own, but not one you rent. We own this car, I'm afraid. We should act like it. Population acquisition. Of course, there's an easy answer to this question. Keep the H-1Bs. Then the state is appreciating its own assets, isn't it? Actually, it is capturing assets from other states. Sounds even better. Highly accretive to the balance sheet. First of all, the H-1B is not an immigrant visa. It is a guest worker visa, limited to 6 years. To the extent that it has become a path to permanent migration, it is simply being misused. The same is true of the famous O-1 Genius visa. There is actually no official USG program for rapaciously harvesting global human capital. If we were to design such a program, it would look very different from the H-1B or even the O-1. In theory, there is certainly an economic place for guest worker programs. Labor shortages can render various kinds of activity uneconomic, even military activity. If you need a rocket program to fight the Soviet Union and the best rockets are made in Nazi Germany, why not import Nazi rocket scientists to put a man on the moon? Don't worry, you don't have to let them put a Nazi on the moon. And it is hard to blame Saudi Arabia for importing Texan petroleum engineers. What if, instead of importing H-1Bs, we imported Aadhaar, which is, this is Aadhaar, Hindi word. It's a 12-digit unique identity number that can be obtained voluntarily by all residents of India based on their biometrics and demographic data. The most sophisticated ID program in the world. We could even give it a name which doesn't sound like you just ran over a frog. And it's like with recipes. You can just import the code, not the coders. But all of these are genuinely special cases. When we look at the economic conditions under which such programs were once established, we might find them reasonable. However, they are exceptional cases in the modern world. In these exceptional cases, we see that domestic labor supply is being stretched to its edges, preventing some whole new universe from blossoming. This is not at all the normal situation. Actually, what we are doing with all this mass migration in both the high-skill and low-skill areas is a cope for our inability to develop our own human capital. It is especially noticeable that in low-skill employment, we have both a native underclass that does not work and an imported helot class that does work, while the high-skill situation is more complicated. We cannot pretend that the government is following a rational policy in this one area when the nature and motivation of the policy has nothing to do with this analysis. The USG is not focused on developing its human capital. To the extent that it is acquiring capital in this way, it is not because it understands what it means to be a country, but for the opposite reason, as a cope for not understanding human capital economics. It wrecks its own capital as it scours the world for replacements. This is hosed. Moreover, why would another country let its most valuable human capital immigrate? Especially a third world country, which needs its Tamil Brahmins far more, I feel, than we do. This question goes to the very nature of the post-1945 world order, which has always had a bizarre science-fictional Wendell Willkie telos of world government. Is there any life left in that dream? What if we shut down the UN and no one noticed? Like, what are we even doing here? Then, of course, we have the well-documented damage that diversity causes to the social fabric in both neighborhoods and workplaces. Let me see this link here. Oh, it's an NPR article. Political scientist, does diversity really work? Often when he has these little links like this, there's fun little Easter eggs inside them. In this case, it's genuinely just a source for what he's saying. This is settled science, so there is no reason to talk about it. It only encourages the deniers in this house, etc. But we have to agree with the H-1B defenders that the impact here is not that great. Let's talk frankly about race for a moment. In this house, we believe in science. Race science. I'm going to say that one more time. In this house, we believe in science. Race science. Within my lived experience, middle-class immigration from India seems reminiscent of Irish and Italian immigration in the early 20th century. While the Irish and Italians were quite uncouth, their children were only mildly coarse. Today, their descendants, if they live in a few small cultural enclaves such as South Boston or the Jersey Shore, remain figures of fun. But the normal historical course, aided of course by a 50-year migration moratorium so profoundly racist that it distinguished between Northern and Southern Europeans, is for Irish, Italians, and Indians to assimilate more or less perfectly across generations, modulo a non-trivial decline in the national character, which is sad but probably would have happened anyway. Certainly the character of WASPs, Jews, etc. also declined across the 20th century. And while India may be in some ways the worst country in the world, we can't say they're not sending their best. All the evidence is that they are sending their best. Unlike some other regions you, I, or Trump could name. And the best Indians can be excellent. Surely there is a racial reason why there are more Indian than Chinese CEOs. So all in all, a mixed bag. In the Indian case, it is less the action that is wrong than the principle behind the action. Because finally, across the board, we sense that all the talk of the objective advantages of mass migration is just what my father, with his Sopranos accent, used to call pissing down my neck and telling me it's raining. None of this policy is motivated by any kind of noble aim, not humanitarian empathy and not technocratic governance. I believe that many intellectuals genuinely believe in these policies for these reasons. Not everybody is a shill, and some live players are even intellectuals. I do not think Elon Musk is motivated by the opportunity to hire a few 85K dealer technicians. But the intellectuals are always the exceptions, and they are never the actual cause. This is one point that I saw a bunch of people saying, and I don't think I've said this on the show before, so I'll say it here. The people who think that Elon Musk is pro H-1B, which it's pretty well documented, he's actually not pro H-1B per se. But anybody who's like, oh, Elon just wants lots of mass migration so he can get cheap labor, you're a fucking retard. There's probably not another person on the planet who has a cheaper cost of capital than Elon Musk. If Elon Musk was like, hey, I want to undertake this thing, he would get billions of dollars being thrown at him to do this. He is not remotely motivated by like, oh, we got to undercut labor costs. This is like the most midwit take of all time. Mass migration as a policy is motivated by one of two things: corporate externalities or political ambition. At its most respectable, it is a way for businesses to save money by using cheaper foreign labor. At its least respectable, it is a design to gain power for a small meritocratic oligarchy over the whole of society by disrupting the philia and asabaya of that society while diluting its vote. The businesses should realize that they can still win by being the best so long as their competitors also must use domestic labor. The oligarchy should be deported to Mars. Someone told me Elon's real plan is actually to keep Earth but send the libs to Mars. Now we're talking. Alien immigration. The real systemic shock will be, of course, AI. AI is essentially equivalent to alien immigration. The aliens are a little clumsy with their JavaScript at the moment. Their driving isn't quite perfect either. In 5 or at most 10 years, what will our Nepalese Uber drivers, here on God knows what visa, do? It was long the joke in Palo Alto that AI stood for actually Indians. But now silicon is beating out carbon for reals. Look out below. The effect of AI will be the same effect that technology has all across the productive sector. It creates tournament economy effects in which a few rock stars rake in all the bucks. It is a worse destroyer of labor demand than the spinning jenny and the steam engine put together. It will destroy demand for human beings in the developed world, the developing world, and probably even on Mars. Human populations to governments are left as residual liabilities that need to be fed, and in some sense pleasured. Almost everyone is a zero marginal product employee. At this point, to protect any kind of humane existence, it is necessary to restrict the technology of production in a way that maximizes high-quality labor demand. We are essentially turning real life into a video game, a maximally engaging video game. We may even have professional dragon fighters once we can bioengineer real dragons. The only alternative I can see to such a policy of artificial difficulty is one of fully automatic luxury communism, in which the total absence of meaning makes humanity suffer a moral and then political collapse. This political collapse seems likely to result in civilizational suicide, subjugation by barbarians, and a return to pre-industrial technology levels, having lost all of the secrets of pre-industrial technology as well. The species may survive unless there is some kind of technical self-extinction scheme, which seems likely. COVID, after all, was almost a dry run. Greetings to Kate, the resident Italian descendant. So, reading between the lines as you kind of have to with Yarvin, at least the performance that he's putting on is he's recommending that brakes be applied to the technology of production. We don't need to be going full steam ahead on the technology of production and getting far out beyond the high quality labor demand. You need to be able to do both of these things at the same time, which is a fascinatingly nuanced take that I probably wouldn't have entirely expected from Yarvin. So you have Andreessen making the case he's making the EAC case, the accelerationist take, which is that we need to have growth above all. Because if you don't have growth, if the growth stalls out, everything becomes zero sum and we rip each other apart. This is the that's like the fundamental premise of the EAC take. And then you have the effective altruist take on the flip side, which is we need to constrain the growth because we have to have like a UBI and we have to be able to help everyone out, and we have to be afraid of Skynet AI becoming sentient and taking everything over and yada yada yada. This is like the fundamental dispute within Silicon Valley over the last few years. And Yarvin here is taking, as I read it, he's taking a very interesting middle road between them, where he's talking about the necessity of maximizing the capital, and with that needing to pull down to add artificial difficulty levels to the upscaling of production. Because if we full steam ahead too hard into this reality, where ostensibly we have maximal prosperity because all of this work is all being done for us, he's drawing a comparison to pulling in all of this labor, this Indian labor coming in. Look what's happening. You import all of these low-skilled immigrants, or just immigrants, period, and look what it does to the native population, the native labor force. The same thing is going to happen with this like completely untrammeled AI hockey stick, is what I am understanding him positing here. And so the big missing piece in all of this is the understanding of the necessity of maximizing human capital, that this is the role of the state. The role of the state, the proper role of the state, is to behave as an owner of the population and to maximize the capital of that population, which means they need to be doing work that's meaningful. The meaning matters. Just going line go up, GDP go up, automation go up, is treating human beings like little widgets, inhuman widgets. So there's sort of an irony here that he's saying the state needs to treat its subjects like subjects that it is ultimately responsible for, because that's what ownership is. Ownership is ultimate responsibility. So if the state is the ultimate responsible power for its people, it owns its people. And if it owns its people, it has an obligation to maximize the capital of the people, not just squeeze as much productivity out of them as possible. Because if you're squeezing as much productivity out as you possibly can, but you're diminishing the value of their capital, then you're like the company running really tiny profit margins because your costs are so astronomically high. Yeah, you've got great sales. You're making you're generating tons of revenue, but your costs are eating up your base. You have to maintain the human capital. This is the role of the state. The proper role of a state, if it's going to exist as it does, is to maintain the human capital, which means mass importing immigrants, high-skilled or low-skilled, no matter how productive they are, no matter how much they improve productivity, is going to diminish the capital of the native population. $10 Leaf Buck Super Chat from QWERTYZZ7 says, have our masters never played a map painting game? As a Whammon society, they probably only played The Sims. Yeah, right. And frankly, like, there's so much institutional inertia that we don't have statesmen anymore. We don't even have people who think in these terms. Honestly, I'm grateful to have Yarvin be listened to by people like Andreessen and Vance and whomever else. Just because for the first time in my lifetime, it seems like we have the possibility of restoring this type of thinking, being able to contemplate these types of issues to leadership roles in the country. And I think, like, ultimately, fundamentally, spiritually, I disagree with Yarvin in a whole bunch of ways. And I suspect that were he given the ability to govern himself, he would take things in a much more transhumanist, technocratic way than I would want to. But, you know, we can be fellow travelers pretty far down this path. Anyways, we're just hitting the 3-hour mark right now, so I am going to wrap it up. do me a favor and hit the like button. We still got 84 watching. We got 82 likes. So we might have some of you 84, you may have not hit the like button yet. Do me a favor. Swipe down on the live chat. Pull the phone out of your pocket. Open it up. Go hit that like button. Give me a like. Leave a comment if you're listening to this afterwards. Go to kingpilled.substack.com or search for King Pilled on Substack. I will be posting this episode up there afterwards, along with all of the links that I covered today in case you want to share them or go dig into them yourselves. That'll be there. So it'll also go out as an audio podcast. If you're listening as an audio podcast person, then on whatever podcatcher you're using, leave me a 5-star rating and a review. Helps me to continue growing this channel. There are some links in the description that you can also use if you want to support what I'm doing here and keep me doing it. There's a Cash App link and a buymeacoffee.com/kingpilled link. You can do that. And the best way, the absolute best way to support the show and what will get you the most for your money is to go to kingpilled.com and join the King Pilled Discord. It's Wednesday night. I think tomorrow night I'm going to be shooting to do the Schizo stream. So if you want to get in and join us for the Schizo stream, we'll be doing that tomorrow night, Thursday night. It's like it's kind of like a space on Twitter or just a video group chat that we all hop in there and we watch some Schizo thing. I've got a few things, a few possible options queued up. Let me look here real quick. One of them is a Robert Safir video about the forbidden fruit, and Velocipaster is something someone recommended, and I've got a couple other things on the YouTube channel that in my history that I'm gonna pull back up. So we may do that. Either way, if you want to join us for the Schizo stream, after we watch whatever we watch, we usually have a great conversation, and it goes into the wee hours of the morning. So if you'd like to join us for that, kingpilled.com. Follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilled. I'll see you guys tomorrow. I give you Hulk.
When they took a shot at my hero, and they tried to kill the next President of the United States, enough was enough, and I said,